Hello and welcome to the TFF podcast by Fantasy Football Hub, our fourth and final episode of the 2021-22 season as we talk all things Telegraph fantasy football. My name is Fergie and I'm joined as usual by two superb Telegraph fantasy managers. Firstly, Luke Wilson. Luke, how's it been going since we last chatted in January, I think it was, wasn't it?
I've stuck with my plan of holding, so I've dropped from just outside the top 100 to I'm just inside the top 200 at the moment. But I'm hoping you're going to tell me I've got quite a few more transfers than the average, but that will be seen when I see yours, because I know when we went out, and I'll come on to that story later. Like that Kane thing put us about 2 points apart, and gave me one of the best laughing fits I've had for a long while, but at your expense.
It hurts. I've only ever had two experiences like that in my whole history, probably, of playing fantasy, and it had to happen when I'm with you and Paul McNulty having a few beers. We'll talk about that in a second because it hurts.
But I've seen where your rank is now, and I was thinking, oh, that's amazing. That'll be me passing you now. And I've seen your rank and gone, oh, well, that's not happened. So,
we will see. Still plenty of time to go. Plenty of time to go. Yeah. How's things in general, Luke? Everything good?
Yeah, all good. Yeah, all good. Thank you. Yeah,
fantastic.
The nice new weather.
So indeed.
Well, I say that it was sunny, really hot, and it snowed 3 times today. Yeah, so
exactly
weird.
Exactly the same here. We also have the Hub's resident statistician, Carl Weeks. Welcome, Carl. Flying in sky, I see, Carl, still. But how have things been with you since the last time we chatted?
Yeah, no, all's good with me. Like you sort of say, my other fantasy game is going quite well. And it's sort of been a distraction for my Telegraph performance, so which we'll come on to a bit later. And I've also been preoccupied with a little other project that I've been working on in terms of optimization, which we'll probably see one of the slides a bit later on. So I've been focusing a little bit more on that than I have on the performance of my team here.
And optimizing your team.
It'll be something for the future that I'll definitely be looking into. So I'll discuss that in a little bit more detail later on. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I'm very excited about it. And it applies to this as well as other games as well.
Oh, wow. Very excited indeed. Wait everyone for let's have a look at this. So for our YouTube watchers, if you haven't subscribed to us yet, please press the subscribe button in the bottom right hand corner of the screen to make sure you don't miss anything Telegraph or Sky Fantasy Football. Also, please press the like button if you enjoy our content. It would be much appreciated. So for this podcast, we will firstly briefly take a look at our teams and progress before looking at the season player points so far, the best value players so far, and where we should be spending our budget going forward to maximise for the running. We'll look at the fixtures the rest of the season, which players we fancy going forward, the average transfers remaining, and transfer management. We have lots of questions. Thank you so much to everyone. I think it seems to be this season, a lot of engaged managers have done pretty well, which we'll touch on a bit more later. But there are lots of managers, all over social media, especially in Fantasy Football Hub, who are having absolutely storming seasons and have chances of winning the whole thing. So I really look forward to chatting through the questions. And we'll finish off again by looking at our teams and finalising those moves and our plans based on the conversation we have for the final weeks of the season. So lots to talk about. So firstly, Carl, we've got your team up now on screen. You just want to run through it for our podcast listeners and give us a bit of commentary.
Okay. Well, so I've got a 5-4-1 formation. In terms of rank, I'm just in the top 1,000 with about 7 transfers to go. On the screen, I've sort of given my ranks through the season and then my transfers going. I had a very slow start, if people remember, because I went against the Salah for about the first 8 to 10 weeks, and that sort of like made me start off about 16,000. So I've made steady progress throughout the year. The team itself, I've got Ramsdale in goal, which is a bit unfortunate because he may or may not be injured, but I'll be hanging on come what may. I've got another injured player at right back in TAA with Rudiger, which has been a very solid buy at the back. Two Man City defenders in Cancelo and Laporte, and Cody's making up the fifth defender. Now he's there much more shorter term. So I probably should have got rid of him a little while ago, as more of an enabler to make some transfers at the time. And then in midfield, I've got two Crystal Palace players. I've got Gallagher and Elise, who I think is a fantastic player for the run-in. I've got Salah, and if my eyes could read, I know it's a funny name. Is it Kulusevski or something?
We'll go for Kulusevski, I think.
Yeah. I can't read the writing, and I've got Kane up front. So on the whole, it's not a bad team, especially if you think about the FA Cup and how many fixtures there are to go. So I'm content with the team. I've made a few rickets. So when I brought in Salah the other day, it's because, like I said, I've been distracted. So I should have brought him in a while ago, and I forgot. And I thought, well, Ronaldo was playing Spurs, and I thought, I'm never going to make the transfer. So I got rid of Ronaldo before he played Spurs.
Oh, jeez.
So get Salah in, and then Ronaldo. But at the end of the day, it doesn't make a huge thing. And I should have got Salah a little bit earlier and made the transfer earlier. But that was one I kept on saying I'll do this weekend, and forgot a few times. But overall, I think it's a fairly solid team, and there's a few tweaks. But yeah, happy enough.
Good stuff, Karl. Really good season again for you. Very, very consistent last 2 seasons you've had. Very well played. We've now got Luke's team up. Luke, do you want to run through your team and give us your feelings on how you're getting on?
I'm a bit worried that both of your teams look so similar to mine now. So I suspect everyone above me has probably got this template. So I've got Ramsdale in goal, just very cheap, and he's got a lot of, he's got 2 more games than most teams. Cancelo, TAA, who I think was just pulled out for international. I saw an article to say, well, I've seen 2 saying he's probably going to be fit for Watford. So what a surprise. VVD, and then I've got Rudiger and Silva. I didn't plan on having both of them, but every time I brought in a player, the next player then didn't play the next game, so I ended up bringing in both because I know and just they're there for the foreseeable now. Then I've got Gallagher, Salah, Kulusevski, Roger, who's probably earmarked for leaving soon. I went down on a Saint to watch Saints, and he got benched. And I think that there's a couple of players that I've got my eye on, and I've got about almost 2 million in the bank, so he'll be going soon. And then Kane. So I think me and Karl have probably got two differences, maybe 3 differences in the team, but the core's there. I've got 9 transfers left in this, but I've got another team that's sat about 15 points behind, which has got 12 transfers and is almost identical. So that I think those 3 transfers more than make up for the sort of 15 points. So at some point I'll probably be switching my attention to that team rather than this one. But so it's going all right, but I'm a bit worried because I know in our WhatsApp group almost everybody seems to be in the top 100, and almost everybody seems to have the same players as me. So I think there's going to be a few little wild moves because I'm determined to get that top 100 finish this year. It's
really interesting around the timing of when to move, because it's very well. It's not easy. It's very tempting to just hold transfers back in a period where there's a lot of congestion. But I do think the real trick to this game is knowing when to move and not just having I'm just going to hold like obviously in the first half of the season we always say, don't we, hold transfers back, absolutely. But in this final sort of quarter or third of the season, there's a very fine line, because if you can get into players first, you do really well and fly up the ranks before everyone kind of jumps on with you. But if you follow on afterwards, this is when you find yourself sort of stalling, don't you? So it's a fine line between holding back, and I always kind of go on the side of probably using a few too many, at once, as my transfer count will attest to. But there is a bit of risk there you have to take at times. 'Cause if you just sit on transfers, you're probably not gonna, have the finish you want, are you? So, but
this is where you go, oh, and I've got 15 left.
oh, hell. No. I've been shooting through. I've made a few mistakes as well. But so, Luke, you're around 190th, did you say, roughly?
Yeah, just under, 190th.
Really good season as well, though, Luke. A really good season again. So I'm on a 4-4-2. I've currently got Sarr in goal, who will likely be going. I think he's got 2 games to Ramsdale's 1, so I'm probably going to get rid of Sarr after he plays the next 2. I think it's Newcastle on the Friday night, and then Wolves don't have a game for a while, so I'm probably going to get rid of Sarr there, so I get a couple of games there, which is quite nice. I've got Van Dijk, Robertson, Rudiger, and Cancelo. You can see I don't have Trent. I took out Trent just before the international break. I took a bit of a gamble. I didn't have Cancelo because I took him out a while ago as part of a couple of moves. So I just moved on Trent for Cancelo, but I did have Robertson and Van Dijk. So I've got the double Liverpool defence, so I'm kind of happy there regardless.
He's been on fire.
Yes, I've got Saka, who turned out to be quite an inspired transfer. And actually, I know he's a good player, but he's done really well, and he picks up the odd tackle bonus as well, which is pretty good. I've got Rafinha, who obviously disappointed last time out, but he will probably go pretty soon as well. And I've got Kulusevski. I made a mistake in Kulusevski. I didn't realise how cheap he was, and I should have brought him in. I can't remember. Spurs had a Thursday night game against someone, and I didn't click how cheap he was. I was looking for someone under 3.4 million, and he's 3.3, and I could have had an extra 8 points off him, which is really annoying. But it's what it is. Still got Broyer up front, as you say, Luke. Probably look to move him on soon, but I do think he's done a job, to be fair. And Kane. So I'm currently ranked 32nd overall, which is a PB for me, especially over the last few years. I have been as high as, I think I got about 23rd. But I'll just briefly touch on the Kane story now, Luke. So there was a Bristol Meetup a couple of months back now, and I'm sat in a bar, and it's downstairs, and I'm with Luke, and I'm with Paul McNulty, and I'm with James Fricker from Dream Team Tonic, and a really, really good bunch of fantasy guys, and we're all meeting up and we're having a beer. It's when Spurs were playing Man City. I remember the game, and I'd had a few to drink, and I'm yapping away like this to Luke and to Paul and everyone else, yapping away, and I'm thinking, right, I'm gonna do. I think it was maybe Ronaldo to Kane. I'm gonna do it. Shall I do it? Yeah, I'm gonna do it. And before I know it, I'm yapping away, and the players are taking the knee, which is obviously about 5 seconds from the kickoff time. So I'm like, oh my goodness! So I panic, make the transfer because I'm downstairs in this like cellar, and I've only got like 1 bar of 3G. The transfer whirs, and is confirmed after the kickoff. So it didn't confirm before, and Kane went and scored 2 goals. So that is 12 points. And I worked out, I think, that I would be, if that transfer had gone through now, I would be 16th overall, which absolutely makes me sick. So, every week when I look at my rank, I've just got that bearing down on me. And I also think about the Kulusevski one, which I just didn't do through pure idleness. And I think that means I would be about 11th or 12th overall. But, I've had some luck with some other things, so little really annoying story there. In terms of transfers left, I only have Luke at Luke's face. He can't wait. I only have 7 left. So
like 4.
No, I have 7 left. I did have 8, but I moved Trent to Cancelo straight after, so it's just above average. We'll touch on the transfers left later. I've got a couple of moves lined up. I think it's interesting because I'll say what my moves are now, and then at the end of the pod they always seem to change. But I think the 3 moves I've got lined up are Sarr, Rafinha, and Broyer. I'm not sure on the keeper. I have to make my mind up on that one. Rafinha's definitely going for Reece James. and then I can either go to someone like Jacob Ramsey as an enabler and someone like Mendy or Allison, or I can go for Ramsdale, who should be back after Sarr plays his 2, which will allow me to have a better midfielder. So I'll be down to 4 transfers in a couple of weeks, but my team will be probably, set up the best, the best it can. I think I've got the best players in each position. Obviously, Trent is a miss. I could get Trent back, but because I've got Robertson and Van Dijk, I don't think he's, kind of a massive miss since I've got the other 2. Robertson's been outperforming him recently, actually. But yeah, it's a very, very loose rundown on my team. And just to point out, so those people who I know you're all listening, in our Fantasy Football Hub premium member WhatsApp group, we have got about, I think it's about 8 or 9 managers in the top 30 or 40. It's absolutely insane. We've got people who are 4th, 6th, 7th, 9th, 12th, 15th. It's absolutely brilliant. So incredibly well played to all you guys as well. Absolutely deserved. Really, really good stuff.
Just a quick one.
Please do.
You talked about the Bristol meetup, which thanks again for that laugh. I mean, it kept me going for about 30 minutes solidly. And a few random strangers.
My stomach was burning.
My stomach was hurting, but for all the good reasons. But there is another Bristol meetup. I think it's on the 7th of May. I think it might be the 7th of April, but the 7th. But I know there's another one. It's Tom Cantwell from Who Got the Assist is organising it. So have a look on there. But there is another one. But that last one, there was a good, 20 of us or something.
Really good
something
crowd,
like that. It was a really good day. So yeah, if anyone's in the Bristol area, then message Tom and see if you can join us.
Superb. Thanks for that, Luke. Okay, Karl, let's have a look at the top point scorers for the season thus far. If I just briefly run through the top 5 for each. Keepers, Alisson, top, 157 points. Edison, 153. Jose Sarr, what a bargain he has been. 148 points. David De Gea, 137. And Hugo Lloris, quite surprisingly, I would say, in all honesty, 135. Top in defenders, Trent Alexander-Arnold, 172. Van Dijk, 162. Cancelo, 161. Robertson, 142. And Rudiger, 131. Absolutely no surprises there, I don't think. Midfielders, Mo Salah, 185. Highest scoring player in the game. Jared Bowen, 3.9. We mentioned him. I don't know if it wasn't the last one, it was the one before one. Remember, we was like, Jared Bowen's gonna be the one, and what the season he's had. Heung-Min Son, quite surprisingly for me, is up there in 3rd on 144 points. Conor Gallagher, probably the bargain of the season, I think. 138 points at just 2.7 million. And again, another quite surprising one for me in 5th place, Bernardo Silva, with 132 points, interesting there. And the strikers, top of the shop, Harry Kane. What a resurgence he has had so far in this new year with 150 points. Diego Jota was the other one we mentioned back a couple of pods back, 136. Michael Antonio, who got the vast majority of his points in the first half of the season, 123. Ivan Toney, who's had a resurgence, fantastic season, 115. And Cristiano Ronaldo with 109 points. What are your observations here, Karl?
Well, I think my observation should be it's what you'd expect. The best players have scored the most points.
Yeah.
You went through the defenders, and there were 3 Liverpool, 1 Man City, and 1 Chelsea, top of the shop. Same for top keepers, Liverpool and Man City. So as expected to a certain degree, is when you start just going above the top 5 that you sort of start seeing a few names that you wouldn't expect. Cody's in there at number 6, I think that is, slightly above Diaz, which I'd call a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, definitely.
You've already mentioned Sarr, and there's a few Crystal Palace players scattered around there, which is quite interesting. So it's like picking out those more gems. So me, this table itself, the next one's more interesting. This one says best players scored most points, but they cost the most, except for odd one like Bowen. And I'm sure we'll sort of touch on later, even though they scored, he went to that purple patch and he's had a brilliant season, may not be the best going for the running
Agree.
because of number of games left and European commitments.
Just to just in terms of your observation, Karl, around the best players, the most expensive players, do you think this is one reason why a lot of, I suppose, engaged managers are having a good season? Is because, you know, engaged managers tend to pick the best players and, you know, have a couple of fillers or enablers in. We tend to go for kind of, you know, heavy at the back, premium striker, find that bargain midfielder, which happened to be Gallagher this season, which we all jumped on really, really early. You ahead of everyone. Do you think that's one of the reasons why so many engaged managers are having a good season?
Yeah, I think when you then start looking at this, you look at where the value is in terms of your cost, and slightly cheaper, and they get more points per pound is your defenders, which is what you're sort of talking about. And the engaged managers do go down there because they're so reliable on getting their points. They're not streaky as such. You may get a little blip here and there, and they can afford the best players as well in midfield and strikers in terms of Kane, Salah, Son, but they know to get the core and then just get those little enablers to enable this to happen. Whereas some other people, they may switch around too much, I would say, in a strategic way, and that costs them. And they also try to spread their funds too thinly, rather than sort of saying, look, these ones you can just virtually keep there all season long, and then just mess around at the edges.
I have no idea why they put some of the forwards so cheap. Like, you know, even if like Broja 2.4, Dennis 2.6. Don't get me wrong. At the start of the season, obviously they weren't to kind of know that they would be that good, but to have them so cheap, it's almost made it a bit too easy at times to be able to. Luke, you disagree, do you?
No, I disagree.
Okay.
They're priced right.
Do you think?
Those cheap ones. The forwards are all, I said this last time, all the forwards are overpriced in this game. They are massively, massively overpriced. Like, if you think, like, well, I don't know, like, take a decent midfielder. So, I don't know, Bowen or Mount or, well, not Mahrez, he's too overpriced, or Saka, who are all going to start for a decent team. They're all in that 4 or 5 million range. And they're all going to get the same amount of points as the £5-6 million strikers. So it just forces you to play 5-4-1 or like 4-4-1. Well, sorry, or 4-5-1. It just they're all overpriced. The ones that are priced all right are Jota and Antonio on that list. I think Tony's overpriced. Like, if you look at the return on the points per million, that it's not worth having the forwards. So no. I Broja was a risk at the start of the season, as was Dennis. If you picked,
I agree with those.
But like, I you know, was Vardy 6.8 million. I mean, come on, the guy's 34, 35. Like, he's injury prone. Why is he that expensive? Like, he's the same price as Salah. I mean, come on. Sorry.
No, it's interesting.
I think you both have valid points. I think Broja and a few of them are underpriced relative to the top prices in strikers.
Yeah.
And at the same degree, I think defenders are underpriced compared to strikers. So you probably want your upper end of your strikers to be a bit cheaper, your lower end of your strikers to be more expensive, because otherwise, once you know that they're in, you're putting them in. And you want your defenders' prices to go up. And another pet peeve of mine isn't so much about Telegraph. It's across Telegraph, Sky, and one or two others. Is sometimes you get defenders who are cheap because they didn't play much last year. I'm probably thinking of someone like Laporte, who's then like dirt cheap in the following season. And then as soon as he's in a regular position, he's like a shoo-in. And they should have them the defence much more highly priced across the board for all top teams, whether they're first choice or second choice, because if they suddenly become a first choice, they're too cheap. And therefore, you know, it's up to you to bring them in and out as and when. But hey, you know, that's going slightly off topic, I think.
The Chelsea defenders are the biggest travesty, right? It was like I had a defense in, I can't remember, like September, October. Rudiger 3.8 million, Reece James 3.9 million, and it may sound a bit hindsighty now, but I picked Rudiger on my game week 1 team because I know he's nailed on to start for them, and Chelsea were likely to be one of the best defenses going. Even the Arsenal ones, I know, Lou. We said at the start about Ben White, right? Had a little bit of a joke, but he's done really well. But even Gabriel is cheap. The Arsenal defenders are underpriced as well, and when you've got Liverpool and Man City defenders at like 5 point something, even Cancelo at 4.5 is just ridiculously underpriced. But yeah, it makes the game what it is.
Just another quick thing on 2 points. So I think if you look at those top 5 defenders, anybody could have started with them, gone, they're all nailed on, good teams, they'll all do well. Really? Like that, so if you want to save transfers next season, start with a back line like that, and then try and find the Kilmans and people like that you can move down to free up funds. The other thing that I think is really interesting around the midfield, Bowen, Gallagher, Silva, probably Fernandez, so I'm looking down to the top 10, have all done nothing since we last podded. And I'm going to chuck Salah into that for his price. He's really not done anything. But then you've got Son, Mahrez, Mane, Saka, KDB, Maddison, who've all come right up. And you've also got, because you've got Ward-Prowse and Rafinha who've dropped a little bit. So I think it's really interesting because you could almost have had that, Salah, Bowen, Gallagher, Silva as your starting midfield. If you'd moved off them at January and moved to the 4 that have moved up, you probably got most of the points. Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but Salah was 40 or 50 points ahead of the next player in the game in January. And Trent's now only, 13 points behind him?
Yeah, you're right.
Bonkers.
He went to AFCON, obviously, but yeah.
But it's crazy. But Mane did as well, and Mane was nowhere near. He wasn't in the top 10 when we last podded. And he's come back, taking that form. But yeah, it's quite interesting just how solid those defenders are, but how variable the midfielders and the forwards are.
If you jumped on people like, Gallagher, Bowen, Jota at the right time.
And Silva early. If you got on all of them early.
That's what I mean about the trick in the game, about doing really well, is that really early identification of those, of those players in it. We've now got the top points per million per games, which Karl alluded to earlier. What are your thoughts on this, Karl? What are your observations?
I just find it quite fascinating looking down the list. Normally, I have that you have to play a minimum of 10 games to make it on the list, but I sort of cheated a little bit and made it 8. So because
that's what I did, exactly the same.
because of the January transfer window, and Kalusvitsky, whatever he's called, makes it onto the list, and it just shows what a bargain player that he is. I looked down the list, and for me, and I'm a big fan of him, is you've got Michael Elise of Crystal Palace, and he is a superb player. And I am a bit biased. And secondly, I know more about him than I would players at other clubs, because at the beginning of even this, and he's about 9th or 10th there, he's like quite high up, but he was a new player to the club. And at the beginning, he just come on, 10-minute subs at the end. And now he's near enough like he's a starting spot. And he's a great attacker. He creates a lot, he has shots. And unfortunately, there was rumours that he may have come back a little bit injured from international break. But someone like him could be really good value for the run-in, because he doesn't jump out from the data. But more recently, that's when he's been picking up all his points since January, basically. And he's going to be a fantastic. Keep an eye out for him for next year.
Yeah.
You go down the list, and I was quite surprised. You've got Nathan Klein there. You've got a few Palace players. I thought I saw Gay.
He's fourth in the list, Gay. Yeah.
You know, and you've got Wolves and Palace. So if you had to go cheap in defence, they have both done quite well. Wolves, I'd probably discount because of the number of games they've got left, but they have performed really well this year. And then you look through that list of midfielders, and those are the players that, well, midfield and strikers to a certain degree, those are the players there: Gallagher, Ramsey, Bowen, Klitsky, Saka, Basuma, Elise, are ones that enable you to afford the premium defenders, and you can pick one or two of those, and they don't let you down. They're all solid players.
It's interesting because there's a few defenders I'm looking at there. I think Matip stands out for me at 3.5 million. He looks to be first choice, plays every game for Liverpool. 3.5 million, scored 115 points. It's just whether he, one, can stay fit, and two, retain his place in the Premier League for the rest of the season. What do you think on Matip? Luke, what do you think on Matip?
I do like his price, but I just think, I would just always have one of the other three, I think. And then there's so many good defenders. And I mean, I guess the thing with Matip, if you're going to take a risk on a 3.5, well, if you look at that list, well, why would you go for Matip? Because there's always 5, 6, 7 cheap, sub 3 mil who will score similar. I mean, Gahey, I think it is, from Palace. I mean, he's a hell of a player. But him, Aitnery, you've got Gabriel. I mean, you've got Ben White. I mean, if you were going to spend 3.5, Rudiger or Reece James, again, I would chuck them into that price range. So I mean, if you were going for a block, and actually, if somebody sat at 20th position, you could take a real risk on the FA Cup game coming in and just go, do you know what? I'm just going to back Liverpool. But that's the thing when you would go for Matip, if you were getting all 5 of the back of the Liverpool defence and just going, do you know what? If I'm going to win it, that's because that is a good way of doing it. Someone will do it with Chelsea because they've got obviously the easier fixtures and actually back up. But yeah, personally, I like him as a player, and I think he's amazing value versus the other Liverpool guys. But I think Robbo and Trent offer more, assist threat, and I think VVD he's nailed, but he's also got a bigger goal threat. I'm sure someone will disagree with me on that. So I just think I would rather take a risk on someone like Reece James or the security of Rudiger, or drop a few million and go down to probably Gahey because he's got the game, or Ben White because he's got the fixtures.
What do you think, Karl?
Yeah, I was thinking something similar. I was a bit surprised that Luke said about going for Chelsea. I thought he was going to be a bit more maverick and sort of say, if someone was 20th and they wanted to win it, to pick a Crystal Palace defence, because, well, you laugh, and it's a long shot, but nobody else will be having a Palace defence.
No, that's right.
And if you're the only one who's got it, and they somehow beat Chelsea, you're flying, and you suddenly got the leap. I'd imagine there will be people in the top 20 who will have all the Chelsea defence or whatever.
There'll be one, won't there, Karl? I reckon there'll be at least one team in the top 20 who's got the block.
There'll be a few, and therefore, the Palace or Arsenal. I thought another thing when I looked down the list was seeing Gabriel there, and then you got White further down. And it's a very strange season this year because of COVID and everything that's happened and the way the fixtures are falling. So normally you'd be gearing up at this time, thinking of the cup and the extra fixtures that brings. But in reality, the 3 main teams in the FA Cup, Chelsea, Liverpool and Man City, they're all likely to be in semi-finals of the European Cup or Champions League, sorry. And, the FA Cup, there's going to be rotation, and that would take me away a little bit from Matip. And there are some teams that have 2 games in hand anyway, which is the same as the FA Cup games, where you think that, they'd have just as many games. So I don't think you have to, if you want to be maverick, I'd go against the 3 big teams. Otherwise, they're the sensible ones, but you have to be aware rotation. But the point that we saw from the previous one is the defenders relatively are much better than the other positions. So you should be fishing in the pond down here, unless you want to go off piece. You should be fishing in the midfield pond, so you can enable TAA, Robinson, Van Dijk, the expensive ones who are guaranteed spots, because they churn in so much more.
I mean, and I'm not sure if it was lost on you boys, but anybody who's watching the YouTube, the amazing thing was the fixtures literally fell off Fergie's wall, as Karl said, as the fixtures are falling after talking about getting Palace players in. So if that ain't a sign,
you can't see it on the YouTube, sadly. But I did have a Telegraph fixture list up here, which you can't see on the YouTube. But yeah, you're right, it fell. I had a bit of a shock.
That was quite weird. So I'm going to take that as a sign. I might back Palace.
A hell of a sign. But Karl, I think you're absolutely right around where we should be. And I think we'll touch this a bit more later, but I think one thing which I've really focused on this season more than ever is price points and structure. And this is why I've looked at Bowen. If he was maybe 4.5, 4.7-ish, I may not have gone for him, but I really like that sub 4 million bracket. That's why I've gone for like Saka now, because it really fits the structure for me. And if you look at the players, so Gallagher, obviously he's still a really good option. I think he'd be cup tied for the FA Cup, I'm guessing, against Chelsea. Jacob Ramsey at 2.2 million looks an absolute steal if you're looking for just someone just to leave. They've got extra fixtures, they're playing well, he scores a few goals, he looks absolutely superb option. Bowen's up there as well. Kulusevski for me, so he's in my team and he's probably staying. 3.3 million, he looks absolutely fantastic. He's basically Son but on the other side, isn't he? Mwepu is up there, who I haven't seen an awful lot of, but Brighton are not in the best of form at the moment, are they? Saka, still think tremendous value, 127 points. Alicia, as you say, on 94. But this for me is the area to focus on budget, as you say. Who's the one or two who jumps out for you, Karl, in this area?
Well, you did mention it, and I should have probably mentioned it myself anyway. Is Saka is. He's a shining star, I think. And Arsenal recently, they've lit up to be a good, attractive style of football and attacking and scoring goals, and he seems to be involved. And its value, and as you can see, the points. So him, Elise, like I've mentioned earlier, and obviously the other few that you've mentioned, Coutinho's staying there a little bit further down. So when you look through this list, you've got that chap from Brighton that you mentioned. He may be there, but he may not. You'd have to research him more, because I don't know how regularly he starts. But the other names that you've reeled off, are pretty regular and are mainstays in there. I do quite like, perversely to a certain degree, is Decore and Allen. Is a big if Everton somehow managed to put something together, because they do have several games in hand. So if you need, so just say you're an enabler of who did you say Ramsey got injured, and you was quickly scrambling around with 3 or 4 weeks to go, and Everton have got 2 doubles in FPL language, then it's like those two, they don't score goals, but they pick up all the tackling bonuses. But they're there, so they obviously do something. Obviously, Allen's suspended for one more game, but there we go. And again, you and on the other side, you've got your attackers, and not many names jump out at me that I could go, oh yes, I can trust. But then they're at a certain price point. The only one I think is Tony and Jota, but they're relatively expensive. Matea of Palace, he seems to be leading the line, and he has done for the last 4 or 5 games. But that's where that would be a key, is to get a good attacker in, especially now that Antonio is took dry January a bit too far.
Yes, yeah, he has indeed. So let's have a look, Carl, how that what that means for us in terms of your your graph for the lines of best fit. What does this tell us in terms of for the running now? Where should we be focusing our budget?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't really look at this too much because it's just covering grain. It is basically saying the red line. So in the bottom right hand corner, what I've done is plotted the lines of the best fit. So this is really sort of saying where you should be spending your money, and the defenders stick out like a sore thumb. And it's basically saying get as many defenders as you can, and if you've got money, put them into defence. So get premium defenders on the whole, and then midfield and your strikers are your last option. In general, if you didn't spot any outliers, and there are outliers, and I think Kane, in terms of the graphs, is a bit of an outlier. So you look at the scatter plots, and you may sort of see, even though generally forwards don't get loads of extra points as the value goes up, Kane is definitely one that sticks out to me. So if you've got the budget, he's worth putting in.
Fantastic. Anything to add there, Carl, on kind of structure and formation, or do you think it's pretty easy to know what kind of team we're going to need going forward?
I think it's pretty. I think the strategy will be 5 at the back. And I think that's all the data that we've seen so far. And without telling you what's going to come up, I think that's going to be the continued story going forward. It's going to be 5 at the back. You can go against it if you need to catch up a lot of spaces and do a Hail Mary. But if you're playing good fantasy football strategy, it'll be 5 at the back.
Yeah, stuff there. We're just going to have a quick look at the player total points per game per million across all positions. So this is for, if you are looking for an enabler, this could give you some real clues. We've already mentioned Ramsey, 2.2 million tops the lot for when he plays. Matip second at 3.5. There's a couple of the Chelsea boys in there. Malang Sarr, 2.1 million, incredibly cheap when he plays. The one that interests me, he's not on this one, I don't think, but he is on the other slide, and that was Chalobah, who seems to be playing a fair bit, 2.5 million. Again, he probably falls into that realm of you don't really need to because you should focus your budget elsewhere. But if you are looking at a Chelsea block, having like Rudiger, Reece James, Malang Sarr, and whoever else would go in that block would probably allow you to go pretty hefty in midfield and up front. You could maybe go for Salah, Son, and Kane, for example, or something like that. But it's worth monitoring because we mentioned him on the Dream Team podcast this week, Chalobah, and the Dream Team boys seem to think that the kind of the Aspies and Christensens and all that will play. And Silvers will tend to play a bit more in the Champions League games, and maybe someone like Chalobah or maybe Sarr will play more in the Premier League, because obviously Chelsea haven't really got much to play for now in the Premier League, have they? But he is worth just having a monitor. 2.5. Gehi, who I picked up for a few weeks this season, as a transition player. He did really well. I took him out, and when I took him out, he managed to have a clean sheet followed by a goal in a clean sheet, which is incredibly annoying, but he's been really good this season. Just having a look a bit further down the list. Alisson's interesting that he's in there, 4.3 million in terms of points per game per million. For an expensive keeper, premium keeper, he's in really well. And Robertson is in here as well, which is interesting. So just a few names there. Robertson and Alisson for me kind of stand out in terms of, to be really good value at their premium price shows what incredible options they are, right? The fact that they are scoring so many points for their price. This was over the last 8 games. I should have said, Carl, this is over the last 8 games or so. Matty Cashin at 3.2. He's obviously had a hell of a time of it recently as well. Connor Roberts, so Burnley. We'll touch on the fixtures in a second, but Burnley have got a lot of fixtures left. I think they've got 11 fixtures left. He's only 2.5 million, and they're going to be fighting for their lives, trying to keep clean sheets. He could be one if you're looking for a budget player as well. But yeah, just some names there. Gabriel, 3 million for Arsenal, and Olise, as you said as well. Carla, 3.1. But just a few more players there to maybe throw into the mix. Let's look at the optimum team, Karl. Possibly my favourite slide of the night. Do you want to just talk us through this?
Well, you may not be saying it's your favourite slide of the night when we get to the next one. I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway, the optimum team. So what I do is just try to optimise based on the points and the prices. What would be the team if you just kept it and had no transfers? And it's a 5-4-1. So as we sort of talked about. And I'll just go through the players very quick. It's Sarr in goal. At the back, you've got TAA and Van Dijk, Cancelo, Rudiger, and Cody. In midfield, you've got Salah, Bowen, Gallagher, Saka, and then up front, you've got Kane on his own. That comes in at a price of 49.9, and you'd have scored 1,662 points. So that's about 60 points behind the current leader, and it put you in 51st place with no transfers used. This is basically a reflection of everything that we sort of talked about. The only slight thing is you've got Cody there as one of the what I'd call non-premium defenders. I've then done another optimization without having any constraints on price, and that's come out at 4-4-2, where you'd have your Alisson in goal, TAA, Van Dijk, Cancelo, Robinson, Salah, Bowen, Son, Gallagher, Kane, and Jota. So it's actually quite Liverpool heavy going through that, and that would have scored 1,705 points. So it's still a little bit behind the top spot. But yeah, a lot of those players you could have just stuck in from day one, as we've been discussing, and it's just one or two little tweaks here and there to get to that team.
Spurs' resurgence has been remarkable, haven't it? Because Kane was nowhere near this a few months ago, was he? And all of a sudden he's burst up to 150 points. Absolutely incredible. Luke, what are your observations? Any surprise in this team? Or
on this team, I mean, Saka is the one that has kind of surprised me. His form of late has been amazing. I mean, there's a few others, because I'd be really interested to see post January or just after the transfer window as well, because I know. I mean, I'm just slightly related, but if you took that cut-off point there, I know when we were chatting on that day, there was kind of 3 transfer options for me, and obviously me and Paul got it wrong that day because we went for Ward-Prowse, who, having seen Saints recently, is basically a third central defender who's on set pieces. But Coutinho is the one that I've seen him in a couple of your charts, Karl, and I didn't think he was going to bring the game he had at Liverpool, the form he had at Liverpool before he went to Barcelona, but he looks the same player. And I think if, him and Saka are the ones that this half of the season have really surprised me. And I think if ultimately you'd swap from Bowen to Saka or to Coutinho, who were my other 2 options when I went Ward-Prowse, then, they've been absolutely flying. But I love the fact, and I think despite having a really good season this season, I think I'm just going to be really, really strict on transfers next season. And I think, no, but I was this season, to be fair, up to January, I only used, I think, 10 or 11 or something. Yeah. So I actually stuck to it this year. But the fact is, you take the 4 that are there on both teams, that TAA, VVD, Cancelo, Robertson. I mean, they'll all probably get a bump in price, and Rudiger will probably get a bump in price. But like, if you just went with them, Salah and then Kane, and any budget option from players that you thought they're playing, and then maybe use 4 transfers to find those enablers like Conor Gallagher or I don't know, Bowen when he hits a form. I mean, it shows there. If you can get to 100, 60, 70 points behind the winner without making a transfer. I mean, you imagine how happy you would be if you had that team now. So I think, I mean, that's my reflection going into next season. I mean, my advice to those who are in the hunt is you've got to pick the form player that's the next one, as the point you made earlier. So you could probably, if you haven't got Saka, I think he's on fire. So I would be looking there. We talked about Coutinho. I mean, not as many games. Annoyingly, because I've looked at Leicester are the ones that I think will have a bit of a resurgence like Spurs have. Kuleski is another one who would probably be in there if you did a second half team. But those are the ones, if you can pick those, but Leicester are just overpriced. You know, Madison's what, 5 or 5.2, Vardy 6.8.
Yeah, expensive, isn't it?
Tielemans, what's he, 4.7, I think, or 4.6. They're all too much. But I think Leicester are the ones that I think they've got the games and that. But there is one player that I have been, it's probably worth noting. But Kovacic, I think it is 3.3 million at Chelsea. He's missed probably 50% of the season, but when he's been fit, he's always featured.
Yeah,
and at 3.3 million, he's a 2.2.2 point, 12 point, 2.2.2 point. But he could be a nice little pickup, and he's at a nice price. And I don't think anybody, I mean, his ownership at the moment is less than 2%. So he could be. So if you are doing that Chelsea block, you might want to chuck him in for a bit of a guarantee risk. But I'm probably not answering your question now. But
no, okay. I think we give a tackle bonus. I do think just briefly off the tangent. Do you think that the tackle bonus and goalkeeper saves have added to the game this season, Luke?
100%. It's made it a much, much better game, in my opinion. It's made a load of these defensive midfielders really, really viable at the price. And so they're worth a little, you know, these non-fashionable players, I guess, the defensive midfielders, they're generally priced 3.2 or below. But with the tackle bonus, they're all worth, I think you did the analysis at the start of the season, Carl, but they're all worth like 20 to 25 points more. So they're actually probably worth 3.5, but they're still not sexy. So they'll probably stay at those price. And, you know, if you were taking TAA, VVD, Cancelo, Rudiger, Robertson at the start of the season with Kane and Salah, well, all those defensive, you know, fill it with 3 defensive midfielders, sub 3 million, you know, are going to play and are going to tick along. You're laughing, really.
What do you think, Carl? Do you think it's enhanced the game?
I think it's enhanced the game for exactly the reason Luke mentioned. But from a discussion that we had near enough at the beginning of the season, I don't think that they reflected the prices accordingly. So I think it makes it has made it a better game, and it brings more players in. And I'm quite happy that the midfielders that Luke talked about are still cheap as chips, and you know, because that just gives them some attraction. But for the goalkeepers, it's just made like the cheap ones too valuable.
Yeah,
and they should have upped their price or done something. And yeah, if they get it's like everything, get your price points right. The having it makes the game more fun. Which reminds me a little bit, especially because you mentioned Alisson. I think there's an article I saw floating around about Liverpool and about how they broken the defending or whatever. And I didn't read it, but I think the gist was that they let people shoot now instead of trying to block the shots, which may mean that Alisson gets more saves, but they're easy. So I think their tactic, or I'm only guessing, is like as somebody is about to shoot, is to move out the way a little bit to give Alisson a clearer view to save the ball, rather than trying to block it and getting those wicked deflections, which then go into the goal or miss the goal. So it'd be interesting to sort of see Alisson, how much of it's clean sheets and how many extra bonuses he's getting from saves.
Yeah, that's what Burnley did last season and the season before. Their tactic was to just let people shoot them 20. They would give them the space to shoot from like 25 yards because they were very, very confident that Pope would save all of them, and that's why Pope's price is so high. I think he's like 4.1 million because he just kept loads of clean sheets, and he's an interesting one for the rest of the season. He's obviously a bit too expensive, but they have got a lot of fixtures, haven't they? He's excellent in Sky, in the Sky game, as you'll know, guys. I'll have a quick look at the Alisson stuff in a sec in terms of points, but Karl, optimum with 10 transfers. I'm assuming this is what you were talking about earlier around your project.
Well, that's right. And I say it's my project. It's the project that I'm working on that isn't invented by me. I come across a YouTube, and I can't remember the chap's name. I think he's Turkish, but lives in Canada. He's an operational researcher, and he talks about optimization with transfers, and he does it mainly in FPL. And he gives tutorials online, and then he starts talking about Python. So I've been trying to learn Python to be able to do optimization where you can make transfers. And I've applied the methodology to all the points scored within the Telegraph this year. So it's like picking the optimal team in the previous slide, but saying that we can make some transfers and what's the optimal position you can get to. Now, I'm quite excited about this because I want to sort of see what it looks like when we get to the end of the season, and about, is it a myth or fact that we should be hogging transfers for the last 3 months? And I've always just believed we should be keeping transfers back and splurging them. But I don't know if that's true, and I'd like to test that out. So what I've done here, I've started off with the 11, which I think is well, let's explain there's a table here where it gives all the players that have been used and the dates of, so I start off with the 11, and then when the first transfer is done, I give a red block next to the person who's moved out, and then start scoring the points from the person who's come in, and over the period of time. And I think, just trying to, you can probably read that, is that 2,023 points that you could have scored up to now, which is 300 points better off than the current leader, which would be quite nice with 30 transfers left. But one of the faults of this naturally is this is like with captain hindsight, so we know exactly who's going to cause transfers, exactly which games are going to be postponed or not. But it just gives the general gist of when transfers should happen. And they seem quite even across the season so far, but it could be because I've only used 10. And on the right-hand side of the visual, I've given what formation and the budget would have been used. So we start off with 4-4-2. And then it moves, after one transfer, it goes to 5-3-2, then 5-4-1, 5-4-1, 5-4-1, 5-4-1, 5-3-2, 5-4-1, 5-4-1, 5-4-1. So that's, with all the transfers, those are the formations. Pretty common theme, 5 at the back. Okay, there'd only be 3 players that you would have started in game week 1 and you'd have kept throughout, and that's Virgil van Dijk, TAA, and Gallagher. So I've highlighted those 3 in green, and I've highlighted in yellows the players that they would have appeared when you would have transferred them in at certain points. So like Kane would have been transferred in around the turn of the year, which is, that comes much more in line with what we were sort of saying earlier. And Alisson actually would have only just been transferred in end of February. And that's it. The 2 players that I mentioned, I won't, obviously people can look at this or go on YouTube and freeze the slide and look through all the various players and when they'd have come in. They're all familiar names. Saar, VVD, Rudiger, Cancelo, TAA, Bowen, Decore, which you talked about. He had a flying start to the season, if you remember. Salah, Gallagher. Is that Dennis? He had a purple patch at the beginning. Vardy, Chilwell, Mount, Cody, Robinson. Oh, Mahrez. I forgot about Mahrez. He's a like, when he hits form, he's always worth going in. Elise, that I've sort of mentioned, he would have come in much more recently because he's now got a team. And the Spurs chap, I'm just not going to butcher his name for the 4th time, so we know who we mean. But it's to me, this is exciting, and you can apply this to any game. The one thing I did realise is I don't know. I never knew the real transfer rules of Telegraph. I always thought you couldn't transfer a player if that player transfer out a player if that player had played within 2 hours. Not that you can't make any transfers at all.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So it's never really sort of like come into play.
Yeah.
And so I had to reread the okay. So I've broken that rule. Not that it's occurred. But I will be doing this at the end of the season when we've done 40.
Fantastic.
Again, this is an odd year because of blooming COVID.
Yeah.
And next year is going to be a bit odd because of the World Cup. But, before I die, I'm sure I'll have one good year where I could have done the analysis. But I will be doing it coming into the season, so beginning next season, of how spread out your transfers should have been.
That's amazing.
And I was amazed, and this is where I've always gone wrong, that I would have expected a cluster around, that FA Cup, and that doesn't seem to have been the case. But it may just be because it's only done 10, and it'd be interesting to see what 40 is like. But that's a snippet of what's going to come at the beginning of next year. And
this would work incredibly well for Sky as well, Carl, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because the premise is the same, isn't it?
Yeah. You can do it for all of them. Sky and Telegraph are the easiest because you have fixed prices.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And yeah, I'll be doing it for Sky as well for myself, and I'm happy to share. But yeah, you can see from Sky when that will be and how many single well, I'm going off to the wrong speaking to the wrong people. But how many single games would you have missed and all that sort of stuff. But
I think the question, the golden fleece, I think, in these games is, and it may change season to season, but it's when to use your transfers, isn't it? It probably does change season to season, but there's still probably a sensible template to kind of use. But yeah, that it's always the question. It's the big question. How many transfers should I have left? How many should I have left? And yeah, it'd be really interesting, Carl. I think excited for that.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. That's why I've done so bad this year. I've just been trying to learn Python and trying to get all this stuff. It's been hard, but I'm getting it to work and throwing out some answers that seems reasonable. So if you get inventing a time machine, we'll do very well.
Superb. Thank you for that, Carl. And just lastly, on the kind of look back so far of the last few months, we've just got the up to date overall ownership of players now. To just run through: Mohamed Salah 55%, unsurprisingly. João Cancelo 44%, Conor Gallagher 36%. He is no longer a secret. Conor Gallagher owned by over a third of the game. Harry Kane 35%, Trent 33%, Rudiger 31%, Jota 30%. Jota was the highest in January. He was 44%. Saka 26%, Antonio 26%, Bowen 22%. Before we move down to all those players under 20%. Luke, is there anyone in there surprise you? Anyone you think should be in there?
I'm just skimming it. I mean, I'm trying to think if there's anybody that I think.
I'm surprised Antonio is still in there, to be honest, at 26%. Maybe that's for teams that run out of transfers.
Well, yeah, all dead teams. I mean, Ramsey, I can't see Ramsey at 2.2. That's the one that's missing.
I think Son's quite low as well at 15.8 because he's always a very popular fantasy player, isn't he?
He is, but he was. I mean, if you think all the Spurs players were terrible in the first half of the season, so
yeah,
I think the people that I reckon 5% of that Son ownership is people who are engaged. 10% is probably people who are dead teams, to be honest. But yeah, Ramsey's probably the one that I think everybody in, well, half the teams in the top 100, I would bet, have Ramsey at 2.2 million. And that what I'd love to see in the similar way to Sky, I'd love to see the percentage for the top 1,000 because that's the real ownership, I think. Yeah. But yeah, no, I don't think there is anybody that sort of really stands out as glaringly obvious that they're missing there. Or maybe Carl come in now and he'll drop about three names, but no, they all seem similar. I mean, Robertson's probably one that would have had high ownership early
he's
doors.
low.
He's not there. I mean, he'll have served you really well, noticing you've got him over Trent in your team earlier. Like he'll I mean, that's amazing differential.
I picked him up 5%, and he's still only 7.85%, which I find absolutely bizarre because he's been one of the. I think Robertson and Kane have been the two most informed players in the last month or so. I picked him up. I picked him up for Cancelo a while ago. For some, I think there was like, I don't know, a 3 for 1 or a 4 for 1. I just decided to go for it a little bit. But yeah, he's been really good, and I actually think now I can probably hold him instead of Trent moving forward. I don't think I need to get Trent back as Robertson is matching him.
Yeah, they can't afford to lose a game, can they? Neither City. So they've got to play all their good players in the league, is my view on them. So yeah, he's got to play.
Agree. Ronaldo may be the only other one in there. I would have thought, just from a pure
early doors.
Everyone loves Ronaldo, don't they? And he's not on there, especially on the back of his hat trick. And he's got really nice fixtures coming up. Actually, we'll touch on those next. Karl, any surprises in there?
Well, I have to say some names just because Luke edged me on a bit. I am surprised Luke wasn't surprised that we got Ben White in there, considering what you sort of said about Ben White.
He's been good.
Yes.
I know.
Yes, I'll hold my hands up, Luke. I'll hold my hands up to him. He's been good.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
But the only one of our bets that I've got right recently. So
I was going to mention Ronaldo, which you sort of mentioned. That the two names that I thought may appear there. One would be what's he called? The Man United winger, Sancho. Yeah, I thought he may, just because he's meant to be hitting a bit of form and there's tends to be
expensive. Really expensive, yeah.
Another player I haven't looked at in terms of price, and I don't think I would buy myself, is the Liverpool guy, Diaz, is it? Luis Diaz, the new one they purchased. And he's been explosive, only because I thought, he may catch people's eye. I wouldn't go there myself because of the minutes. But I thought other, the masses may.
I mean, Diaz is an interesting. It's probably worth noting because we were chatting about again when we met up, Andy. And I mean, in my sort of third team, which is doing terrible, I did bring in Diaz, and then he went and scored, and then I, for some unknown reason, took him out, and then he scored and scored and scored and scored.
Well.
I for those thinking of taking a bit of a punt, I personally think Jota has lost his place in that front three. I think Jota had made it his place, and I think it's now Diaz's place to lose. So I think it's Mane, Diaz, and Salah, and I think Jota will come on for whichever of the three of them is not doing well enough in the game. That's where my head's at, and I think that's reflected in the way that Mane has finally pulled himself together, and he's hit some form now. So I can't see. So yeah, I really like that front four, but you can only play three of them. So I wouldn't be touching Jota. So he'll go on and absolutely smash it now, obviously. But yeah, I would probably steer clear of Jota now because of the Diaz factor that he's coming. He's looked classy from what I've seen. And I mean, I've only watched sort of match of the day highlights and stuff, but yeah, he looks really good. He looks some player, to be honest.
It's interesting because he's a 4.4 million forward, Diaz, in this game, under 7% owned. Mane is because obviously when Diaz plays, he pushes Mane up front, and Mane 6.6 million. We know he's expensive, but again, and under 9% owned. If you did want to try and go for a bit of a Liverpool attacking block, you could have that front three for a couple of them are very, very low owned. So if they go and smash a few teams, 3-0, 4-0, 5-0, you could be, you could see a lot of points in there. Interesting stuff. Okay, let's have a look forward now then. So we've looked back, what the data tells us. We're really clear now what we need to do going forward. Let's have a look at the remainder of the season. And firstly, we just got a tweet from Fantasy Football Hub at FFH_HQ. This doesn't include FA Cup, but how many games do each team have left? Interestingly, Burnley, as you mentioned earlier, got 11 games left, joint with Everton, as you mentioned earlier, Carl. 11 games left. Leicester have also got 11 left, but obviously they're still in Europe, so you maybe wouldn't expect their better players to play in every one of these matches. 10, Arsenal and Chelsea, but Chelsea obviously got their FA Cup semi-final, so that puts them right up there with 11, potentially probably a final. Apologies, Carl, but you probably expect Chelsea to beat Palace based on odds alone, but Chelsea could have 12 games, and they're very good fixtures as well. So Chelsea, I think, are definitely one we should be really, really looking at for the running. I do like Arsenal as well. They'll have, obviously the thing here with Burnley and Everton, they've got a lot of fixtures, but they're not very good teams, right? So unless you're looking for enablers, and Leicester, I personally think that you mentioned it earlier, Luke. Leicester's assets are just very expensive, for kind of what they are, aren't they? 5.5 million when you can get. We just talked about getting Mane for 6.6 or whatever else. On 9, then you've got the vast majority of teams. That does include Man City and Liverpool, who will certainly have 10 games, and one of them will have 11 because one of them will get to the FA Cup final. So my kind of immediate thoughts there are you may want to hold off a little bit on transfers regarding those teams until they've played those back-to-back games, because they play each other in the league, then they play each other the following week in the FA Cup in a couple of weeks' time. After those games are complete, you will know who's going to be in the final. So I would say kind of hold off transfers there for either of those teams. And then just with 8 games left, Brentford, Leeds, West Ham and Wolves. We've already touched on this, but players like maybe Jose Sarr, Rafinha, Bowen, Antonio, maybe even Ivan Toney, for example. Only 8 games left when you've got Chelsea, you've got potentially 12, Man City, Liverpool 10 or 11. I think this tells us a bit where we should focus our transfers to the rest of the season. So I'll come to you firstly, Luke. We've now got the fixtures up for the rest of the season. I haven't thanked FF stuff. A lot of the graphics we're showing are FF stuff, and a lot from Carl. Thank you so much, Carl. Luke, what are your thoughts, your overarching macro thoughts on strategy, on players, teams, transfers for the remainder of the season? Just a small question there,
because I'm conscious there's a couple of questions I've seen that I'm conscious of when I'm answering this. So the safe play is piling on Chelsea, in my opinion. Wait for the Liverpool City FA Cup, and then whichever team loses, move their defenders. I imagine. I don't think nobody's going to get rid of Salah, and I don't think anybody's really going to have a City attacker. Really, I don't think, because of their prices. Because really, to do well, you'd have Kane and Salah probably at the moment, I think. But it's all about that defence. So I think if City go out, most people will have Cancelo, and I think going into Reece James is probably the option there. This is the safe play, and maybe even moving your keeper to Mendy as well, which would give you, probably most people are going to have Rudiger or Silva, depending on when you brought them in, which one was playing for the game you brought them in. And then that would potentially give you 3, maybe even 4 Chelsea defenders. Obviously, if Liverpool do it, I would probably go the other way, and I would probably move, I don't know, it would probably be VVD, assuming Trent's fit. But if Trent's not fit for Watford, then it will probably be Trent to the other. So I think the safe players do that and load up on Chelsea. Now, interestingly, Chelsea's attacking options, there's nobody really at a price point I really like, that I think other people can't outscore them. I think there's other players that are better value.
I quite like Havertz at 5 million in midfield.
5 million though. I mean, I don't know. I just think there's better ways of spending the money than a 5 million midfield. I don't have, my structure of my team is never built for a £5 million forward or midfielder. Really, it's a heavy hitter in budget. So I'm not there. But then I think the alternative to that, that's the safe play. So if you're playing for, I want to finish top 50 or top 100 or even consolidate in the top 20, pile in on Chelsea. I think if your ambition is to win it and you are conscious that, you know, if you look at me, Karl, and Andy's team, they're all, 8, 9 players are the same. Given that you're going to transfer Sarr to Ramsdale. So we're talking probably, 9 players that are the same. I think then you want to back one of the City or Liverpool team and maybe go for that, or even go as far out as the fixture dropping sign we had earlier and go for a load of Palace, because Palace could, you know, if Palace, they've got those extra 2 games, they could be the team with 11 games. And the price points that they're at is unbelievable. I mean, you just pick 4 stupidly expensive players and then budget everywhere else. I mean, it's so, I think so in summary, the safe play is piling on Chelsea defence. The Maverick play is probably pick one of Liverpool or City, which one you think is going to do well, and back them all the way, or even go really out there and back Palace to be the one that performs. But I think ultimately come back to, in the league, Chelsea are safe for 3rd. I think Liverpool and City are going to go down to probably the last day, so that they've got everything to play for. So I don't know. Yeah, Chelsea's probably the safest of the options, but yeah, pick a horse and back it, I think, if you're really rolling the dice, and try and go for a block somehow.
What if you're not rolling the dice, Luke? What if you've got,
play it safe with Chelsea?
Just go with Chelsea.
Well, I mean, I just can't touch Burnley. Leicester are overpriced. I mean, there's a couple of Leicester players that are rotation risks but are well priced in defence. But then why would you spend the money on a Leicester defender when you could get the, you know, a big 5 defence? Arsenal have got more fixtures in the league and they're going for it. I mean, that's probably, you know, so if you haven't got Saka, he's a good priced. I mean, that's kind of middle of the road. But yeah, so the safe pick's probably Chelsea, Arsenal with the price points. I wouldn't touch Burnley. I wouldn't touch Everton. I just think they're not good.
They're not good.
Well, they're not. Everton look awful, to be honest.
What are your thoughts, Karl, on strategy for the rest of the season?
Well, God, it's what a question. I just think, first of all, I think the rest of the season is just going to be fascinating to see how it unwraps, and it'd be interesting to sort of see how it evolves. And it is so difficult to give a definite answer. I agree with so many of Luke's points, but one of his points would make me go against Chelsea and not think of them as a safe pick, because assuming that the 3 clubs make it to the Champions League semi-finals, which I think individually they're all favourites to get through. Chelsea have a deep squad. They have many great players. They're safe. They're not going to win the league. They're going to be in the top 4, and I think they're prone to rotation a lot more than the other clubs. And therefore, I would tend to stay away, because you mentioned a few names. You've got Sarr and Chalobah, I think, are 2 excellent defenders and could easily play. So if you went a block Chelsea defence, they may play half the games because they're rotated. So that would lead me to sort of stay away from them. I think the safe play is to pick either Man City or Liverpool while they're battling out for the top spot. You know, I think that could be a sensible play. Another sensible play, a bit more risky, is trying to back someone like Arsenal or Spurs. I would tend to go for Arsenal because they've got 10 games, I think. So you only lose out on 1 game. They've got a lot to play for. They've got no Europe rotation. So a block Arsenal defence, a bit more maverick. It's not safe, but I think that could be a way to make progress, but still being relatively safe. Leicester, I would tend to think about jumping on them at the right point, except I expect them to still be in Europe. And again, there's that rotation issue. Now, I always like to bring a few laughs. So the one player I know has been on your mind on your other podcast is Wakehorse. And if you've got transfers, I wouldn't be adverse to bringing in, if you've got transfers to burn, I haven't, but if you've got 4 transfers you wouldn't mind getting rid of, Burnley have got a lot of fixtures in the short term. So I'm talking about, I was going to say Pope, Wakehorse would be the 2 that I'd bring in, say today, or at the weekend, because they've then got a double, and then more likely get their 3rd double out the way and catch up all those fixtures and still give you the opportunity to jump onto other players from other teams that have still got their fixtures in FPL terms, like week 36 and 37 and 35. So they'll be playing a lot of catch up. So to get the volume of fixtures, I think you could punt on Burnley in the short term. Hope that you may pick up, hope lots of saves, may get a few clean sheets. I think that'd be, if you've got the transfers, that's a good one. Everton, no, I'd leave them. So I'll keep it to those big teams. And if you want to be really risky, I'll just go Palace and just buy all of them. But you laugh, but
I'm only laughing because it's an uber risk, isn't it? That's all.
Of course, it's uber risk. But if you're like me and you're phased, then you want to win. Well, you'll be the only person with 11 Palace players on the pitch.
Absolutely.
And yes, they'll lose to Chelsea, but what 1 in 10 chance that they win?
Remember though, Conor Gallagher is a Chelsea player, so he won't play in that FA Cup game. So if you are bringing him in, bear in mind he definitely won't get that Chelsea FA Cup game. Yeah,
but you know that he'll play on the Wednesday just after, or the Tuesday just after, when they play Newcastle, and other players may get rested.
I've got,
it's for a risk, I would do something like that, but it's not something I'd recommend to do. I would go Liverpool or Man City, followed by Arsenal. I tend to go more Arsenal than the cup teams, to be honest. Or unless something evolves, like for some reason one of them gets knocked out in Europe, or looks like being knocked out.
I think as well that in terms of the keeper as well, I know that Mendy played the quarterfinal of the FA Cup. I think that sometimes he likes to chuck in Kepa, don't he, just to keep him fresh, which could be quite annoying.
Do you think he'll do that after the calamity of the last one?
Was a calamity.
I don't think Kepa's going to feature again. I just don't think he's going to mess with it. They're at the business end of the season, and Kepa's a liability.
He's played a few league games, and he may give him a few league games.
He might do. He might do, because they got nothing to play for, have they? So
that's right. So if he's not playing any of the European Cups or anything, it's keep him fresh.
This is the thing which is put me off Mendy a little bit, because I'm torn between Mendy and Ramsdale. I've got a question for you. It's an interesting one, and I took out Trent, and one of the reasons I took out Trent, obviously I wanted Cancelo back anyway, because he's obviously a fantastic option for the rest of the season. So the rumours were that Trent was going to miss Watford. He still may or may not miss Watford, but they're the 12:30 game this coming Saturday. Now, after that match, Liverpool don't play again till Sunday the 10th, when they play Man City away in the league. 6 days later, they play Man City away in the league. And then on Tuesday, the 19th of midweek, they play Man United at home. Now, those for me are 3, United are out of the Champions League now. They're chasing down the top 4. I'm not saying that they will beat Liverpool by any stretch, but I do expect Liverpool to concede in 2 of those games, if not 3, right? If not 3. Now, in that period, before they then play again on Sunday, the 24th of April against Everton, Burnley, as Karl alluded to, play 6 times in that time. So, I know you mentioned Weghorst, Karl, but obviously, there's Pope, there's the defenders. We mentioned Roberts earlier for $2.5 million. And Burnley's run is pretty decent. They have City, right? Obviously, that's a bit of a stinger to start off with. Then they go Everton, Norwich, West Ham, Southampton, Wolves, and Watford, which are a pretty good run of fixtures, I think. And I'm probably answering a few of the questions next, but one of the answers to me of how to move ahead of your rivals is to notice this sort of swing. And I don't mean this particular swing, right? It could be that Burnley do absolutely naff all in these games and you've taken out a Liverpool player or two for absolutely nothing. But you can go on FF stuff and go on the on the fixture planner, and it is absolutely littered with all these different options, even Spurs, right? So Spurs, I think Spurs have a 3-for-1 over Liverpool in that period. So they go Newcastle, Villa, and Brighton, whereas Liverpool only play Man City away in that time. So go in for something like Trent to Son, just as an example, or bringing in a fullback or something like that. I'm probably answering the questions a bit ahead of time, but you don't then have to go straight back to Trent. You can then look at the next lot and daisy chain off Son if you want to, or keep him, if he's on form, onto someone else before then potentially going back onto Trent if you want to at a later date. So these are the tactics which I personally use in terms of really trying to maximize points. It's giving me very little risk in terms of I don't expect Liverpool players, especially defenders, to score many points in those games. So it's very limited risk, in my opinion, towards kind of an unknown upside. It could be not a very big upside, but it could be a phenomenal upside, depending on how on how Burnley do. You could even do Alisson to Pope, right? So we just mentioned Alisson there. All right, he'll probably make a few saves in these games, but Pope has got the opportunity potentially of 3 or 4 clean sheets in this time, where Alisson, may not keep any. But these are the kind of moves. Arsenal play five times in the time that Liverpool play those 3 games. Even City themselves. So in the time where City play Liverpool twice, there are teams who play a lot, who play a lot more. So in the time that Man City play Liverpool twice, that's their only fixtures. Man United play 4 times, and that includes home to Leicester, away to Everton, home to Norwich, and Liverpool. So even something like a City defender in that time out for a United player, for example, could work. So I'm just trying to explain my thought process of how I try and optimize transfers. Now, I've tried to be a bit too clever early on, so I'm probably at a position now with my transfers where a lot of my transfers are now just looking at ones that I want for the rest of the season. But if you're still sat on maybe 10, 12, 14 transfers and looking at ways to optimize them, there are plenty of ways throughout the rest of the season to actually do that. I think limiting your downside and really increasing your potential odds of your upside. That they're just a couple of examples there. But have you guys got any other kind of strategies you use or things you look out for in terms of maybe when to use specific transfers or not?
For me, it's all about backing a couple of semi-final teams. But I think you've made a really good case. And one player we haven't actually mentioned is Matt Doherty, or Doherty, depending on who you are and how you want to pronounce it. But he's been phenomenal in the last month, and he looks to have taken that Spurs right back place. And I'm not quite sure why I'm advocating getting a Spurs defender in for a Liverpool mainstay, but if they've got a 3-for-1 over Liverpool, and Liverpool are playing, they are playing very difficult games, that could be a good move. I like the Trent to Son shout as well. Karl, you talked about it earlier, and it's probably worth you jumping in again, but the move to like an Arsenal block, and I think Gabriel and White are nailed, and it's Cedric I don't know what price he is, but I'm assuming he's absolutely dirt cheap. I'll have a look in a second, because he seems to have got that right back slot now. So I'm assuming he's low 2 millions, to be honest, because he's not a very good player generally. He certainly wasn't previously. But that
he's 3 million.
Oh God, he's more than White. So don't get Cedric. Stick with White and Gabriel there because they're nailed. But yeah, I mean, that could be a play that really works, and particularly, like you said, if somebody's got more than 10 transfers, making those are the moves that are going to move you up the game. And it's interesting because this is probably why I'll never win this game, but I consistently finish in the top sort of top 300-ish every year, is because I don't make those really aggressive moves because they can backfire massively, and I just go for the tried and tested, save the transfers, and then only use 25, use 10 for the first half of the season, use 30 second half, and target FA Cup teams that are going to play their players. But that's just too safe, and there's loads of other people, I'm sure, that are playing that tactic. So I think, it comes back to this. This is about the business end of the season. If you're in for a shout, I like Karl's shout of the Arsenal one with a bit of reflection and with the price points. And I think you could do worse than jumping on Son and Matt Doherty for maybe VVD and Trent, because that's probably the same amount of price, and get those extra games, or move to the Arsenal boys, because there will be a hot back on point. And if Liverpool go through in the cup, you've got an easy move from your City defenders back to the Liverpool boys anyway. What's your thoughts, Karl, given that you had the shout out for Arsenal?
Well, I agree with what Fergie sort of said about those moves. And I agree with you. Normally, it's really good to back the semi-finals teams, but I think that's a common tactic against the top players, and it's really difficult this year because the other teams have got games in hand, and all these teams are in Europe, and I think Arsenal is good. I think Spurs is good, and I think Man United's good. In picking the right ones is the tricky bit, because they've got things to play for. That fourth spot is up to grabs, and the rotation is going to be minimal. They haven't got the distractions of Europe. They've got games in hand. I do like Arsenal. I think they've been solid at the back. I don't think Cedric's even got the spot nailed, because I thought it's just an injury to Tommy or whatever he's called, and he's getting back, and I'm not quite sure how close he is back to challenging for that right back slot. Of course, you've got Tierney on the left back, but Spurs, I think, are good, but they have won their game. Great check with Doherty, Son, Kane, the man I won't name, all good options, and you know that they'll be busting the gut. So, yeah, I would be looking at those. Even if I was top, I would be considering some of those players.
Yeah, and they're not, and I think this is the important thing. I probably won't be doing it because I've got 7 transfers left. And this is very, very much in context of your position and your number of transfers. And this is why we always say to leave transfers less, because you just don't get 6 for 2s in the first half of the season, right? You don't get even many 3 for 1s or 4 for 1s or 5 for 2s, whereas this period of season you do. And it just so happens that the 2 best teams both play each other twice as well, which again, obviously very, very rarely happens. So it's a bit of I just see it as a bit of an opportunity which has arisen, rather than something you kind of actively look for. It's just there. It's there in front of you.
Yeah, I think if City beat Liverpool, the title is near enough done. If Liverpool get a draw or beat City, I think it'll be a race to the end, and they'll be going for it, and therefore they'll be worth investing in those players. Yeah. But if City win, I think, and they get through in Europe, it looks like they're qualified to the semis. I think there'll be a lot more rotation and to sort of like shy away a little bit more.
I think that's a really good point. And Sunday the 10th of April could be the day that decides, obviously decides the title, or swings it heavily in one team's favour. Because it could also be a pivotal point in where we use our transfers, because I'd probably be a bit more reluctant to go for maybe, I don't know, Laporte, because at the moment he's their only really top quality fit centre back, so they'll probably want to use him more in the Champions League than they will in league, for example. And even like Robertson, because Simicast has had a couple of games. Robertson's had a rest, not so much with Trent. I think Van Dijk will play come what may, but I think that game could have quite a few, and the semi after. I know, Luke, you're really big on the FA Cup final, aren't you? I'm not so much, because the kind of way I think about it is it's only one game. It's probably likely, according to the odds, that the winner of Liverpool and Man City are going to play Chelsea. So that's going to be a really tough game, as we saw in the Champions League final last year. And I personally think that there's a lot of other opportunities to let's just look at Man United and Spurs fixtures now. So Man United go Leicester, Everton, Norwich. Spurs go Newcastle, Villa, home to Brighton. I fancy the key players in those teams to score better in those games than a Man City player or Liverpool player to do in a final against Chelsea, just as an example. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I historically I've always gone big on the FA Cup final when it's the last game of the season, and let me just explain why. Because then any additional players you've got, I mean, you're competing against players who aren't getting any points. Yeah. So if you've got 8 players and somebody else has got 2, you just by default you're going to get 20 points more than them before anybody does anything.
Yeah.
It not being the last game of the season changes things, and I think this whole COVID thing. So I'm less big on it, but at the same time, I come back to Chelsea, Liverpool, and Man City. 2 of those teams, in my opinion, are going to have 11 games or 12 games, and that they're the best 3 teams in the league with more games than anybody else. That's why I like it. It's more the long game of they'll play more games and get more points because they're better players. Yeah, I don't know, Carl, do you want to jump in before we go off on another tangent?
No, well, I really am the same as you. I do like normally going heavy on the semi-finalists. COVID has thrown more double game weeks, which sort of makes it less appealing. And it just so happens it's the 3 top teams that are semi-final and likely to be Champions League semi-final, and they have the big squads to rotate. If it's like, I'll be rubbing my hands if it's Arsenal, Spurs, Man United, or Aston Villa, or the teams that aren't going to be rotating because of Europe. It's just like one of these years with COVID. It's like it's less important than normal. So I think we're probably in the same boat.
Yeah, I am wondering on a comment you made earlier, Ferg, because I know I don't think Burnley are a good team, but I do think they'll stay up. And if they're going to stay up, they're probably going to win quite a few games 1-0. Weghorst is a mountain. He's an all right player, actually. I was going to call him a bit of a lump, but he's actually quite a decent player. But it's going to kill my Sky rank because I don't have Pope in Sky. It's the worst decision I've made since overhaul. But actually, a couple of Burnley players for that Norwich, Southampton, West Ham probably score against them, but Watford you've got in there, and I think Newcastle are actually quite good now. But they've probably got 4 games in the next 6 or 7 where they can easily keep clean sheets. And at the price points of some of those players, they're all sort of, there's a few of them around 3 or under. That does appeal in a way. I mean, it's a risky move in some respects, but Sean Dyche, what does he do? Business end of the season, he tightens up, they keep clean sheets, they win games 1-0, they stay up. season after season, isn't it? So Leicester have just been massively overpriced. I really hope they consult with you, given that they've got you writing now on the pricing. Please sort forwards out next season. I don't mind if all other players go up, because that makes it a less.
Rudiger's going to be 5.5 million next season.
What, 5? I think 5.5 is too much for him.
I'm playing.
He won't even be there, will he? Because they can't.
No, you might be right.
I mean, we haven't actually talked about that with Chelsea, to back up Karl's point, that they've got rotation and God knows what they're going to do, because the whole ownership thing. But let's not go down that rabbit hole. Yeah, there's a few. There are some options here. There's a few different ways this can pan out because of the fixtures, and I don't know, COVID's spiking again. I mean, I'm pray to God that it's not going to come back like it was with another lockdown. I can't see that happening.
I think they've changed the protocols now with the Premier League, haven't they? Anyway, that because before it was any COVID case accompanied by other absences, but now it's a very specific amount of COVID cases. So I can't see it myself.
So I think there are some teams that have got there's some risks in there, but I think you don't win a game. So I know this again. There's some questions that are sort of answering here, but if you're in with a chance, having a roll of the dice on Burnley to keep clean sheets, or Weghorst to score the ones in each of those games, because they probably will score in most of those games because they've got to go for it. Those are the sorts of moves that they're a bit bold and they're a bit out there, but they're the ones that are going to be the difference between consolidating and getting a nice, rather than 20th finishing 15th versus you could finish 50th or you could win it. I'd roll the dice if I was in that position and take a few risks, but there are a lot of little ways you can go on this.
I think for me, the thing with fantasy football, I've only just started to articulate it this season in a way to me which makes sense, because I couldn't quite put my finger on it before. But for me, the way to do well at fantasy football is to limit your downside and to really open up your upside. And it sounds obvious, but there are ways of doing it. By, just as an example, like a Spurs 3, so Liverpool away to Man City against Spurs playing home to Newcastle, away to Villa, home to Brighton. If you've got transfers left, your downside is very, very minimal, because it's very unlikely that Trent or Van Dijk or Robertson are going to Hull. They may keep a clean sheet against Man City, fair enough, or they may get an assist. It's very unlikely they score 10 points. Whereas someone like Kane or Son in those 3 games could quite easily get 15 to 20 points, right? So that's a really good example, I would say, of how to move forward in fantasy football very slowly. And I daisy chain my transfers like this all the time. So I took out Cancelo for Robertson at a point. I can't remember obviously the exact scenario now, but obviously I'm scared of Cancelo because he's such a fantastic player. I think he had COVID one week, and then they had a difficult fixture or something along those lines. And in that period, Robertson had like four games. So that's a transfer I made with that limited downside, but the potential for big upside. And it's that move actually, which has got me as high as I am. You mentioned earlier his ownership is like 5%, and I'm quite fortunate because if Trent doesn't play tomorrow now against Watford, I'm going to have Van Dijk and Robertson against Watford, who Robertson especially is lowly owned, whereas a lot of people have still got Trent. I'm going to hopefully have another springboard off the back of that game before I decide which moves to kind of make. That's an example of one which has worked out. Obviously, there are ones which hasn't worked out. I suppose I'm trying to get the point of limiting the downside and exposing the upside. And sometimes the upside can be absolutely ridiculous, and sometimes it doesn't really work. But if you limit your downside, you're always in a good spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm really, really sold on Trent to Matt Doherty now, because no, I was just looking. I've just been scrolling through the fixtures, and it is just bonk. And there's there's 2 hop back ons if you're nervous. So you can hop back, so you can get 3 for 1 and hop back on for the Liverpool Man United game, or you can roll that game and then get Spurs versus Brentford, and then hop back onto Liverpool after their fixtures. I'm trying to think who Liverpool then are playing Everton. Which, I mean, so it's a 4-for-2 or a 3-for-1. I know it might not be quite that because of the other FA Cup game, but in the league, I mean, that almost feels like a no-brainer that you've basically got. If you just took the league games, it's a 4-for-2, and Spurs' fixtures are all good on paper, and Liverpool have got probably they've got their league rivals and they've got their biggest rivals in Man United. I mean, Everton fans may disagree with that, but
and they've got the Champions League over on this as well, Liverpool, where Spurs haven't got anything.
I mean, I might actually do Son and Doherty and do that, and just but then hop back off Spurs and jump back on Liverpool.
But it's all down to transfers remaining. This is the point.
If you've got over 10, that seems like a bit. I mean, that's 4 transfers to do those moves, but that feels like a good.
But you don't even have to hop on. And I suppose this is the thing, like the whole term of like 3-for-1 in terms of a period of games, but you don't have to go back to. You don't have to take Doherty back out to go to Trent. So if Doherty and Son are absolutely on fire, you take out another person and you leave them in. Like a daisy chain. So you bring in Doherty and Son for these games.
Say that the Spurs very soon after have got Liverpool away, so I think you do need to come off them. But
that's fair enough. But it's just an example of, say someone else gets injured in your team, you can just leave them in and move out the injured player. You don't have to go back to them, do you?
Yeah, right. There we go.
Let's have a look at the questions from the community. We've had so many. It's not very big on screen. I just realised it's not very big on the screen. So I'll do my best to read these out. Stephen Troop, who is a very, very experienced and very good Telegraph fantasy manager, says, given your strong position, how are you going to overtake me and those above me? I think you're talking about me here, because I think Stephen is about
not to us.
He's about 20th. And he said, 2, what should I do to prevent this? But he says, no. In all seriousness, what's the best way to rise when in the top 100, top 50 if you have below average, or above average transfers and most teams similar? So I think we've touched on this a little bit already. I think if you've got below average, and Karls sort of idea is, if you want to try and win the whole thing, or you're streets clear in your mini league, and you just you're like 200 points clear, you don't have to worry about them. You can just go rogue, can't you? And just go for a team that you probably wouldn't be expecting. I personally think the Palace is a bit much. I know you're a Palace fan, Karl, but for example, I think Arsenal are probably, for me, maybe a better option. I think Chelsea are kind of are obvious, though I do think that a lot of people have got a lot of Liverpool and City defenders, so I don't think that there will be a pile on Chelsea, just because we'll touch on average transfers. Actually, we'll go through the average transfers left now, because it's obviously incredibly relevant. This was as of last week. They won't have changed much, obviously, because it's been the international break, but the average transfers left in the top 10,000 now is 8.3. The top average left in the top 1,000 is 6.73, and the top average remaining top transfers remaining, the number of transfers remaining in the top 100, the average is 5.75. So it's interesting, because the top 1,000 and top 100 are quite, that 5, 6, 7 range is quite low. So luxury transfers are quite tough, right? So to answer the question in terms of if you've got above average transfers, I would just do what I kind of went through earlier. I would personally look for these, Burnley have got, was it that 6-3 over Liverpool where they play City, Man United. Spurs have a 3-1 over Liverpool. I would look at these. I would play it kind of a bit of aggressively there, because, like I say, your downside is limited. So even if Liverpool do keep a clean sheet away to Man City in that one game, okay, 7 points. Kane, you would, or Son or Doherty, you would expect to score a few more in that period, and there are other instances of doing that. So I think you can afford to be a bit aggressive. I think in terms, so I'm probably bang on the average. I'm just above the average actually, but I probably can't really afford to do that. I suppose I have to make a decision now. Like I say, I'm 32nd. I don't think I've got the number of transfers left to win it. I might have if that Kane transfer would have gone through on time, and I'd be like 16th. But I'm not sure I've got the amount of transfers that's going to win it, especially knowing the caliber of some of the players above me. So I've got to make a decision now whether do I go for it, or do I try and just finish with a very, very good good rank, hopefully maybe between 10 and 20, for example. So I've got a decision to kind of make there. If I'm happy to coast along, I'd probably just more or less stick with the team I've got, which I'm tempted to kind of do, because I think I've got a fabulously balanced team, really good structure, and a wonderful team. And I don't really want to. I know, Luke,
I've got a grenade here. Fergie, imagine being the greatest fantasy manager of all time, winning back-to-back fantasy football games. There you go, everyone who's in and around Fergie. Right, I've thrown that grenade.
Yeah,
you'd be a no one. I know Dan Cox has done well, but like you'd be better than Dan Cox. Imagine how Dan would react to that.
Yeah, there's a couple of players who've done better. I think there's a Michael Shipley. Yeah, Michael Shipley.
Back to back.
Yeah, a couple have done well, and one or two others. But anyway, no, it's a really good point. It is a really good point, and it's something I have to consider. I don't even know if I need to do it yet either. So this is the point, because the way I play the game is, well, I like to think I'm continually optimal. So, like, looking at my team now, I kept Rafinha because he's now got 2 games to a lot of others. I kept Sarr because he's got 2 games to a lot of others. 1. So my next move will be looking at who gets the next, who's got the next 3 for 1, for example. So I like to think I can continually move forward. But anyway, I don't know if that's answered your question there, Stephen. But many congratulations, on having a really good season. Right, I'll ask you guys a few of these. Who's got the kit? Can't wait, he says. Questions. Best goalkeeper for the run-in. Luke, have you got a one-word answer for the best keeper for the run-in?
I'll give you 2 names: Ramsdale or Mendy.
So who's the best keeper for the run-in?
Ramsdale.
Who do you think, Karl?
Alisson.
Okay, so he's 4.3. I do think the Ramsdale 2.8 versus Alisson 4.3 is interesting, but then it comes down to budget, don't it?
Okay, can I quickly say on Ramsdale, because he's injured. I've got him in all my teams, various different places.
Yeah.
But isn't he injured at the moment? And I'm not quite sure when he's back. So I wouldn't buy him until he plays.
He might miss Palace, mightn't he, on Monday, I think. Next question from him. Which Chelsea defenders? So order of preference, top 3. Karl, can I ask you first?
Rudiger. Well, because you've got James. James is the best. Rudiger, Silva.
Okay. Luke?
Rudiger, because I think he will play all the games. Mendy, I'm going to chuck. I know he's not a defender, but I think Mendy will play most of the games. I'm going to go out there and say I'm taking on board Karl's views of the Champions League. I'm going to say Christensen, bit cheaper, and he's going to get his fair share. He'll probably get FA Cup games. So
I think Christensen is very cheap. I think he's like 3.1. He's very cheap.
Yeah.
I think mine would be. I think I'm probably going to stick on Rudiger and James just because I'm not sure who else is going to play. So I probably have to bottle it and go Mendy. But I think in my team I'm going to have Rudiger and James as it stands. at the moment. Thanks for the question there.
Just a quick one on that. It'd be interesting if we had a Chelsea fan, because you say Christensen. I thought he was off to Barcelona or something next year, and he's leaving, and therefore I'd imagine Chalobah, who you sort of like his name popped up earlier. I think he's fantastic when he plays.
Yes,
he would be above Christensen, but anyway, I just want to mention that.
You're probably right, to be honest, Carl. Sorry. Yeah.
Man United assets, yes or no? Luke is shaking his head viciously. No, you don't. No, you don't fancy him. How about you, Karl?
If I'm punting, yeah. I don't think they're. I would recommend staying away, but I've got no issue having a little punt, thinking that they have to do something at some stage.
I quite fancy Man United. Well, I fancy one player. I fancy Cristiano Ronaldo. Off the back of a hat-trick, their next 3 games, they're the 5:30 on Saturday, home to Leicester, leaky Leicester. You get home to Leicester, away to Everton, home to Norwich, and that is a 3-1 over Chelsea. You could even have a 4-2 over Man City or Liverpool, who play each other in that period as well. You also get a 3-1. Actually, you get a 4-1. Actually, you get a 5-1, I think, over Leeds. So, you know, anyone on Rafinha to Ronaldo would be a bit of an upgrade. But I think this little period here, they then play Liverpool and Arsenal away, which is obviously going to be difficult. But this is an opportunity, which I mean. So Ronaldo's 11% owned. If you've got transfers in the bank, there's no harm in, you know, if you have got Rudiger, or you're planning on getting Rudiger, just an example, or Reece James, you could do worse maybe than go into Ronaldo first for a bit of potential upside. Because in that time, Chelsea are away to Southampton in that period, which they might keep a clean sheet.
Yeah. I'll give you one Man United player that I wouldn't mind a punt on. It's Elanga at 2.5, got 30 points since January, basically because he didn't play. But they're overpriced. I mean, Ronaldo or Kane, Ronaldo or Salah. I mean, it's no brainer.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't be going for, I wouldn't be taking out Kane or Salah. Maybe Salah's I went for Salah, maybe a little bit more, but if you can get to Ronaldo off someone else, if you can afford to, I think it's worth a punt. And the last question, 5 or 4 at the back. I think we're all probably agreed that 5 at the back is the way forward for the rest of the season. We had a question off Luke Disable from Scout, and he said, "Should I play this game next season for the first time? Is it easy enough to get your head around? Is it similar to Sky? In that, is there at least a glimmer of hope we could win?" So I answered him actually on Twitter, so I'll read my answer out in a little bit. But Karl, what would your answer be to Luke and anyone else who's potentially listening, who's thinking of playing Telegraph for the first time?
To be honest, I don't really fancy people of that caliber to play.
well, there is that. There is that.
But no, I'd recommend playing it. It's a classical fantasy game, easy to get your head around, and you don't have to have the same level of planning and dedication that you may have to have on games like Sky, which I know that he excels at.
I completely agree. Anything to add there, Luke?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's. So I've seen the Twitter chat as well. So I think it's a game of value. So it's not about the best players; it's about the best value players. No captains is brilliant, in my opinion, because it means certain play. You don't have to look at big hitters. First half of the season, the aim is to do no transfers, so set and forget, which I think you've mentioned. I think the one caveat is that it takes it to another level at certain points of the season, is the amount of alarms you need to set to make sure you make transfers between games. That's the only, it's probably 3-4 weekends a year where I get my wife giving me the glaring look, knowing that the alarm that's going off is a fantasy football related.
I think up third round when Lukaku's home to Plymouth or whatever it was they played, or Chester.
Well, he did really well there, didn't he? Yeah.
Got a goal. I got take off half time. Swine of him.
Well, yeah. Well, if our players actually put away the pen. Anyway, don't get me started. That pen was ridiculous. He's scored pretty much every pen he's taken this season. Missed that one, but yeah, I mean, I think there is a real, if you're good at fantasy football, there's a realistic chance of winning in this game. You just need to get the fundamentals right, which is it's about value and maximizing the transfers for 3-1. So the transition from Sky to this is quite easy, in my opinion.
Very, very easy. Easier. Yeah, I just replied. Definitely got a shot of winning and doing well. Low maintenance for the first half of the season. You can miss hauls, and it doesn't matter. It's just a long game that counts. No overhauls or chips. It's a game for the fantasy purists. Was my answer there, and I absolutely love it. It's still my favourite game after all these years. Neil Baker says Liverpool to Chelsea to pylon or not to pylons. We did touch on this earlier. Now we've gone through, the stats, Luke, and now we've gone through the fixtures and stuff. Liverpool to Chelsea to pylon or not? What do you think?
So I'm on the fence now. If Liverpool get beat in the FA Cup and the Chelsea team is a strong team in the FA Cup, then I probably will. But I think Karls pointed out that Chelsea are more prone to rotation. So if you don't have Rudiger and Liverpool go out, Trent or VVD to Rudiger is a no-brainer. I think if you had Alisson to Mendy is probably another no-brainer if you've got them. Reece James is rotation risk and injury risk. I think that's why he wasn't in my top three. So I think it's a harder call than I thought it was before we spoke today.
Yeah,
but it's all about that FA Cup game, Liverpool versus Man City for me on that move.
How about you, Karl?
Yeah, similar. I less likely to go on Chelsea because of the rotation and issues around there. Even if they're big against Palace, I'm not there. I would punt on Liverpool if I thought. I don't care about the cup if they get through because it's only one game, and they've got they continue their title charge. If you think that they'll continue their title charge, I see no problem in going with them or City.
Yeah,
I would stay a little bit more clear of Chelsea because of they've got less to play for.
Yeah, I think I'll probably wait until that FA Cup game, because after those two games are done, we'll be a lot clearer when we on who to target going forward. He asked. Sorry,
can I take this question just because I wrote a big article on this a couple of years ago?
Absolutely.
Right.
So statistically, are we better off with defenders 5-4-1 at this stage of the season?
So pre-COVID, this is where all teams go into ultra defensive mode. So statistically, this is the period of the season where the least goals are scored, with the one caveat that the last day of the season where everything goes bonkers, right? So up until game week 37, so statistically defenders pre-COVID always kept a lot more clean sheets, and that's reflected, and you get all those bottom teams that are suddenly like, Christ, we need to win this. So it's the Burnley effect. We need to win this 1-0. Yeah. You get a lot more 1-0s than you do for the rest. So yes, for me, 5-4-1, and particularly with these big players like Cancelo is a defender who's actually a winger, as is Trent, as is Robbo, as is Reece James. So you've actually got attacking players who get defensive points. So, it's a no-brainer. Go 5 at the back.
Karl, you got no argument there, I'm assuming?
No argument for me.
Okay, and how many transfers do you normally carry into May and for the final week of the season? This is an interesting one. Obviously, there's the FA Cup final. Karl, can I ask you this first?
Oh God! So you're just talking about last 2 weeks, aren't we? In May?
Yeah. There's 3 weekends in May, I think, and the FA Cup final.
I would go for 0.
So you'd be all in by then already.
I'll be all in because what you want to transfer for. So if you've got like one transfer left on the last week of the season or whenever, how much are you going to make from it?
Yeah.
So I'd try to use it before, and then you at least roll your dice and trying to optimize its value. So I'd go for 0.
I'm going to say 1. The Walcott effect. Theo Walcott always plays on the last day of the season and scores a brace or a hat trick. Lukaku versus when he played West Brom versus Man United, 4 goals. There's always a player that people are touting, oh, he hasn't played much, and then they play and they do. There's always a player like this. Again, a bit of a dice roll. But if you're going for it, I mean, we were there, Fergie, when Andy came third in the world in FPL, because he captained Mane and everyone else went Salah.
Yeah.
And that was literally a last 2 minutes from deadline decision he made on that. And that took him from 8th in the world to 3rd in the world because he made that decision. There's always a player that there's news filtering through last minute. So I like 1 just for the fun of it. But yeah, the safe play is you don't need a transfer for that last game, but like the fun play. And if you're in with a chance, that last roll of the dice, you know, you can actually do, I know there's the question from Stephen, for example. I know there's another one on the WhatsApp group, but 1 back, if you're genuinely in top 10 and you could, 1 roll of the dice, a hat trick could win it for you. Keep 1 back.
I would say going into May, because game weeks, I'm talking FPL terms now, game weeks 36, 37, 38, there's going to be a lot of fixtures in 36, aren't there? There's going to be some doubles in 37 as well, and the FA Cup final. I would say this season it's probably best, if you can, to have like 3 or 4 transfers left going into May. But I probably wouldn't. I'd agree with Karl on the fight. When you get to the final week, I personally wouldn't have any left, because I agree that you can get, you likely get better value from a couple of games earlier on. But I take your point, Luke. It's each to their own there. But teams like Man City, Liverpool are probably likely going to still have 5 games in May, because they're going to double in 36, play 37, have an FA Cup final and play in 38. So there's still a lot of games in May this season. So it's just something to be aware of, I think. He also asks, name 1 key differential you've got your eye on. He thinks Coutinho from late April. Look forward to it. Have either of you got anything to hand, gents? Differential?
Doherty.
Who, sorry?
Matt Doherty.
Doherty.
Yeah.
Yep. That's a good shout. How about you, Karl?
Wow, I've already mentioned Elise. I would go for him.
You like Elise?
Yeah.
I think player, and just on a quick look, player springs to mind for me. I'm gonna go for Havertz. He's I probably won't get him because he's 5 million and he's a really awkward price point, but he seems to have nailed that place up front, or at least in the front 3. Even if Lukaku plays, I still fancy him to play somewhere in the front 3. So I think Havertz at 5 million could do pretty well come the last knock-ins of the season. Keith Ledger. Last year, with 8 game weeks left, I was 19th with 6 left. This year, I'm 350th with 14 left. Which position would you like to be in? Interesting question. What do you think about that, Luke?
Much rather be 19th because I can have the screenshot.
Well, it is that.
350 with 40. I'm 290th with 12. So he's in a similar boat to me there. I would snap somebody's arm off to be in 19th with 6.
Yeah,
because you're making blocking moves then, not attacking moves.
What do you think, Karl?
Yeah, well, my question to maybe Luke can answer is, how many points are you between 200 or whatever position it was in 19th? So the position don't matter if the gap is narrow. It's how big is that gap that you're trying to make up. To be honest, I don't care about 19th. I wouldn't even screenshot it. Top 10. So I'd still be attacking even at 19th.
Which of the 3 of us is the worst player? I think it's this guy, yeah.
No, but you want the glory. So I wouldn't be blocking moves. I'd still be attacking if I was 19th.
It's
unless you got mini leagues.
It's roughly about 90 points. So there's what's that? 8 transfers for 90 points. I would much
Give me
rather
90.
be in a good position.
Yeah, give me 19th.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Cool. But a really good question, actually. Good debate there. And Keita, if you subtract your starting 11 score from your total points and divide by transfers, does this give you average points gained from each transfer? It's probably one for you two. I think it probably does, doesn't it? Not each individual transfer, but it gives you the average, doesn't it? But so if you've scored 1,700 points, but your starting 11 is on 1,300, you've used 40 transfers, 400 points divided by 40 is 10 points.
It's sort of, but it doesn't account for, I don't know, broken leg, guy was out for 9 months of the season.
This is the problem, Keith, when you speak to statisticians. This is the problem, is they bang on the money. What do you think, Karl, quickly on that one? Do you think that's a fair way of working it out? Or
It is, but it can be distorted just for the reason that Luke mentioned, that it can be artificially high if you give it any stock. But yeah, that is a correct way of calculating it.
They've actually stopped showing, haven't they, the starting 11 in the leagues on Telegraph. They used to have a separate league, didn't they, for starting 11 where you could work it out, but they haven't anymore. Interesting. And Stephen answers those questions interestingly. He says 100% the 19th. And he says it does, but not sure whether it's meaningful. No, that's fair. I do think it's meaningful, because I remember a few years ago, I was on this pod actually about 2 years ago maybe, and I remember I had used 20 transfers. Let me take a breath before I say this. I had used 20 transfers. My starting 11 had scored more points than my actual effing team. That's how badly I had used my transfers. I was actually in negative points from transfer use. I should have just left my starting 11 alone, not even logged on for 3 months, and I would be doing better, and I would have had 20 transfers.
I think I talked about my Son transfers. I think it was last year in FPL, where I cost myself 72 or 74 points on 3 Son transfers.
Man,
and it took at the end of the season, I think net I was 20 points down on making transfers versus my starting team in FPL. It's like, so yeah, I share that pain, Fergie. Those are horrible seasons.
It hurts.
Write them off. Done.
Gary P asks, should we now be targeting FA Cup teams, and if so, who? Also, which teams will be safe enough to play for historically down tools, so to speak, that should be avoided? We haven't really mentioned the teams to avoid yet. We talked a lot about Liverpool, Man City and Chelsea, so we won't go over that again. Teams to avoid, teams on the beach. For me, fairly recently, kind of Brighton looked to be, I don't know what's happened with Brighton at the moment. Southampton seem to have gone, they were on fire, and they've gone really off the boil as well. Any other teams you think at the moment you should maybe avoid?
I'd avoid all the teams that have played 30 games.
So like Leeds, West Ham, Wolves,
Brentford. They're beach, and also just because they've got less games. But the ones you mentioned, there's quite a few of them. Southampton, Brighton, Aston Villa to a certain degree, though they're not on the beach. I always say sports people as a whole, you've got an inner desire to win, and I think it should be some sort of like old wives' tale that they go on the beach, but it does seem to occur.
No, I've played football. No, I've not. Well, I've played sport and played with enough people that when even, there's plenty of people who will switch off. They've got all the talent, but unless they've got that massive carrot, they're just like, well, I'll go through the motions, still be better than others.
Daniel Moody asks really good question. If there was such a thing as a TFF wildcard and you had to play it this weekend, who would be in your 11? So what is the best 11 for the remainder of the season? I've got mine. Have you got yours to hand, gents?
No, I can probably...
I think it's pretty easy.
Is this a case of no transfers till the end of the season?
It's just very rough best 11 from now to the end of the season. I'm just going to look at my team, I think, and I would go Ramsdale, 2 Chelsea, 2 City, or 2 Liverpool, and then 1 of the other. Salah, Kane,
Kulilevsky. See, I'm getting the dose of Karls here, aren't I? And then
Saka.
I'd probably Saka, Ramsey. I mean, I think that leaves about 2 million budget. Well, I don't know. Maybe Coutinho over Ramsey, actually. Saka and Coutinho. Well, no, Coutinho. I don't know. Something like that. I think there's a couple of places that I'm not sure on, but 9. I'm looking at my team and I've pretty much got that, so I'm quite happy with that.
Same, Carl, but it's the template. This is the problem. You're going to be going all in on Burnley block defence now, aren't you, to try and catch it? Carl, what do you think? Anything to add there?
Nothing to add, except I'd have 3 Chelsea. 3 Man City, 2 Liverpool in defence, and I wouldn't bother with Chelsea. But yeah, pretty much the standard.
So I've just looked at my team. I've just been playing around with transfers. We've been talking, and the 3 transfers I mentioned at the start, I think I'm fairly nailed on them. Just to say, I didn't realise that Jacob Ramsey is 4th for tackles over the whole Premier League in the last 5 game weeks. He's averaging 4 tackles per week. So at 2.2 million, and he gets attacking returns as well. I think that's kind of settled it for me. But I think Ramsey. So I think my ideal team. I'm not too sure. Maybe Ramsdale, Mendy, Alisson. I think they're all kind of much of a muchness. It all comes down to budget. But I think Cancelo, Rudiger, Reece James, probably Trent or Robertson, and as you say, either another one of those players' teams. Salah, Saka, Kulusevski, probably Ramsey, and then Kane. I think that comes to roughly 50 million, which is what my exact team is going to be after I make a couple of transfers in this next week or 2. So,
you're under budget with that team. You'll be a couple of million short of the 50, I think.
If I go Mendy, it's bang on. If I go Ramsdale, I save 1.5 million. So it's something I need to think about. But no, interesting stuff there.
Good question.
It was a very good question. Stephen asks, who are your top 3 under 3 million outfield players for the rest of the season? Looking for budget players. I would chuck in straight away Ramsey and Ben White. I think I would chuck in those couple of names. I know, I can't believe I'm saying Ben White. I can't believe it, Luke.
Wash your mouth out.
I know. Anything to add there, gents? And under 3 million? Or Ramsdale? Oh, sorry, outfield. You did ask outfield.
Gehi, or whatever his name, the Palace defender at 2.3 million. Brilliant. What's his name? Hernandez at Watford. He's just come into the team. I saw him live. Cucho, yeah. He 2.9? Yeah, 2.9 million. I'm not saying Watford are good, but a striker at 2.9 million. I mean, he's in really good form as well. So there's a real left field shout, but he's under 3 mil.
You could bring him in on Saturday the 9th. They play home to Leeds, home to Brentford, away to Man City, then home to Burnley. So they've got 3 really good games in 4 then. And they have, I'm just having a look, they've got a 4-1 over Leeds. So you could, if you take out Rafinha there, you're still holding on to Rafinha, but again, there's a few options there. Got a 4-2 over Spurs. Probably wouldn't do that in all fairness, but yeah, interesting option there. Anything to add there, Carl, in that bracket?
Well, no, obviously there's Gallagher, but apart from that, no others.
Dennis asks, who do you think has been the biggest surprise player this season? Who's been the biggest flop? Anyone got anything to hand there?
Well, the biggest flop is easy. It's Lukaku.
Oh, you must good shout. Good shout.
But the biggest
It's got to be Gallagher, Carl. It's got to be Gallagher.
Yeah, it's your shout, Carl. Come
your
on.
Shout.
Take credit.
Well, you named him in pre-season.
But therefore it wasn't a shock, was it? Because you expected it.
Well, I certainly didn't expect Conor Gallagher to be basically PFA player of the season.
Oh, yeah,
I'm not having that, mate.
Wait and see. Thanks.
I am not having that one.
Yeah, I'm going to chuck in 2 additional ones to this, right? I think Mane, until very recently, has been bloody awful. Ronaldo, bearing in mind that Ronaldo historically in TFS was getting 250 to 300 points, and there was a couple of seasons where he got over 300. Like, the fact that he's only around the 100 mark, I know Lukaku, right, terrible, and I'm with you, he probably is actually a bigger flop, but Ronaldo should be so much better, so much better, and he's not been. So I think, yeah, I chuck those to Mane up until the last month, and yeah, Ronaldo in and into that as well.
I think Reece James has had a breakout season. I think he's been absolutely outstanding. It's just a shame he got injured. He's absolutely flying. I think he's been, we know he was good, but he surprised me with how just incredible he has been when he's fit. This has been the problem for him. But Dennis, maybe he had a spell, didn't he, where he was absolutely out of this world for a bit. We've got a couple of questions from our WhatsApp group. I'm not going to name this person. I don't think it's fair. But this person asks, what tactical advice would you give to a TFF manager who is in the top 20, 27 points behind the leader, with between 15 and 20 transfers in hand? He says, asking for a friend. Now, I know this chap, and he is not asking for a friend. He is asking for himself. And he's in the Fantasy Football Hub Premium Membership WhatsApp group for anyone who isn't. But I suppose in terms of advice there, I would just go with what I kind of said around this low downside, high upside play, transfer maneuvering, but obviously making sure that your end, the team you end up with when you've only got like 5 transfers left, you're absolutely jam-packed with the best players in the game. But I think you've got a very good chance of a very good finish there. Any further advice there, gents?
There's a role with that many. The safe play isn't the play. You've got to roll the dice, because otherwise you'll end up on the last. So you've got to go for it with some of these. It's just which of the options you take.
Just nail all these 3 and 4 for ones. So just go for it.
Yeah. I'd do a shout out for Ian Parron's spreadsheet.
Absolutely,
if you haven't used that you then check that. If in that position, I'm sure if you're in that high up, you would be anyway. But you got to go for it.
Karl, anything to add there?
Yeah, no, I agree with what you both say. You've definitely got to go for it. You've got to work out the right flight path if things go well. Like you sort of say, like when you've got your last 5, make sure you've got your team, how you get there to finish. Yeah. But also, if your transfers that you're rolling the dice with don't pay off, then be prepared to go off piece at the very end as well. So you've got that flexibility. Hit it now with the perfect plan to finish with. But if it doesn't go well now, then have a plan B of where you could adapt to.
Like that, Karl.
I mean,
really good advice.
I mean, in all honesty, if I was in that position, I would have the pen and paper out, and I would have every transfer. So if it is, what did he say? How many did he say? I'm just looking, 15 and 20. So let's take 15. So genuinely assume there's no injuries. I know there will be some injuries, but try and work out every transfer that you're going to make. So assuming this happens, okay, so you'll see a Chelsea clean sheet. I will take player A or player B and just have some sort of flow chart of the transfers you'll make, and just make sure you've got the budget to make the moves that you want to do. But yeah, personally, I would go to pen and paper and just map it out for the rest of the season.
Transfer planner.
I know, but I'm old school. Christ, I've been playing this game for almost 30 years. So, and then just to see, there will be some injuries, and the beauty of the injuries with that amount of transfers is others won't be able to respond, and you will.
That's it. Exactly that.
And another thing to think about, and you're probably in a better position to answer this, Fergie, because of what you've done last year, is how much attention do you pay for all? What position is he? 12th or 15th, or wherever he is? of the teams at the top and trying to figure out
Yeah.
what their plans are or what teams that they've got.
I personally would. Well,
Was that too far out at the
I
moment?
say I personally wouldn't. I did, but Dream Team is a different game in terms of you know how many transfers people have got left, and you can see everyone's teams. On TFF, you don't know how many transfers everyone get, and you can't see their team. So you can work out little bits. Obviously, you know, if you check the points after tomorrow's Liverpool versus Watford game, you probably have a very good idea of who he hasn't got from Liverpool. But I personally think it's a bit too early to be doing it. I think he's got the transfers to actually play his own game still. So I don't mean go mad. I don't mean go all, like I say, bring in 3 Burnley players. But I think just an example, you could, you know, if Trent doesn't, well, if he does or doesn't play, that Trent to Son move, for example, is a very low risk, potential high impact move that you could do. Yeah. And then I'd look for the next one. I wouldn't be bringing in crap or dross, but I would be looking for these, you know, the 3-for-1s.
But would you figure out what the top 5 teams have? And even though it's not going to impact on you at the beginning, so when in 3 or 4 weeks' time, when you move into your next phase, you can then look at the gap of how many points you are between those and make sure that what your plan isn't you aren't going to be wanting to move to their team. And thinking that sort of way.
I personally think, Karl, and I suppose it's more of a personal mentality thing, but I think, and this is how I would feel, I feel if I made a transfer based on what I think someone had and it didn't pay off and I didn't win, that would make me absolutely sick. Whereas if I played my own game, stuck true to how I play the game, and I lost, then I would just think, fair enough. There are these, I take your point, and there are little things you can do. Like Liverpool-Watford is probably a good example of where you can actually work out which Liverpool players this person has got. But who's to say the people in the top 5 don't take out all the Liverpool players after that, if that makes sense. So that's why I personally wouldn't take too much stock on it yet. Maybe in the final week or two, but before that, I personally wouldn't. I think if you look at the average transfers left in the top 100 is like, what is it, 6? And he's got between 15 and 20. I think he just has to play really, really sensibly, and you're almost guaranteed a top 5 finish there, you know, and hopefully get the big one just by playing your own way. I don't know. It's you know, it's hard to answer, but
yeah,
I can only answer with what I would do, I think.
Yeah, I would. I know Dan. I've heard Dan talk about this many years ago when he won Sky, but he knew every player's team.
Yeah.
If I was in that position, I'd be on Twitter, on Facebook, in WhatsApp groups, looking at every comment, going back through the history and looking at when they're pissed off and when they're happy.
I would,
and I would know every. I reckon I would, if I was in the top 10 or top 20 with that many transfers. I reckon I'd know every player's team.
Oh no, I couldn't do that, mate. I couldn't. Like it'd absolutely fry your brain. And who are you to kind of like I say, that perfect example. So someone scores 21 points against Watford. So I know they've got Salah, Van Dijk, and Robertson. I know if they've got. Who's to say they haven't moved them all on after the game? You haven't got a clue. You
got 5 on average, 5 transfers left. Yeah,
I'd do it in the last week or two, but I wouldn't be doing it now personally. Last question from the WhatsApp chat around Broja. Interesting because both Luke and I. Have you got Broja, Karl? I don't think you have you? No. Both Luke and I've got Broja, so I think I've convinced myself during this podcast that I'm going to move Broja on. I think they play Leeds, don't they, on the weekend? Then after that, Southampton. Well, I say that I might not. I'm going to do Broja to Ramsey at some point, but looking at how the fixtures fall, Southampton play twice to Villa's twice, and Southampton actually play. No, I'm not going to do that move. Actually, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever because Southampton play 4 times in the time that Villa play twice. So I would wait until after that little run and then do Broja. Probably do Broja then to Ramsey maybe, but I keep an eye on the fixtures and how they fall.
It's
Luke,
worth
sorry.
noting. No, two things. So I think he might have been dropped.
Yeah, maybe.
I watched the Saints Watford game. Saints were awful, in my opinion. Ward-Prowse looked quality, but he was literally playing on the halfway line the whole game, bar set pieces. They looked really, really bad. And Brazier, if I remember rightly, he came on as a sub and then he got subbed off as well. And yeah, if he doesn't start against Leeds, I don't care what the fixtures are like. He's gone.
I think that's a good point. I think that's a very good point. Yeah, if you think he's dropped, obviously get rid. Yeah, just looking at these Spurs have got that 3, Broja to Doherty, maybe a good move. I'm just looking at Ramsey because it just helps me for the rest of the season, but I don't think Ramsey's fixtures are good enough yet to do the move yet, if that makes sense. Southampton do have a lot of games. Oh, mind you, he can't play against Chelsea. That's what I was looking at with Broja. He can't play against Chelsea, can he? Because his parent club. So once Broja finishes against Leeds, his next game will be against Arsenal two weeks later, if he plays. So thinking about this more, I think I get rid of Broja after he plays Leeds on Saturday. And if he doesn't play, you could even move Broja on to maybe like a Chelsea defender or someone along those lines. Good question. Glad I looked at that one, actually. We have had a few questions in off the most enthusiastic Telegraph player around. He's absolutely wonderful. He's an absolute joy. Simon Baldock. He's a massive fan of the hub as well. A few questions. Firstly, he says a community shout out to TFF first timers. So these are a few players, the first time they've played the game, and they're all in the top 50 apparently. Paul Holden Warren, Neil Baker, who asked some questions earlier, and Rishi Patel. First time playing, all in the top 50. Absolutely wonderful play. Very, very, very well done to you, and really nice of you to shout them out, Simon. He has a question. So he says, looking ahead, I'm in a quandary with my team. He's ranked 400th overall, which is his best ever, with 11 transfers left. Unsure what to do with Broja. Have a 5-3-2. Contemplating doing a recalibration. Is it worth switching Broja for Ramsey to enable further switches down the line? And then, looking forward then maybe to Leicester, Spurs, Arsenal, Chelsea. I think the fact that he can't play against Chelsea, his parent club, would probably be, you could probably get rid of Broja after the Leeds game on the weekend. And if he doesn't start, get rid of him earlier. Anything to add there, gents?
No, not really. I think it's a sensible move to get rid.
Yeah, cool, okay. He says, with finite transfers left, though all the way is above the average, is it best to hold on to them for game week 34 onwards or use transfers at now to focus on aggressive moves, i.e. Sice to James or Cancelo? I would definitely be doing that move. So yeah, I don't think that's an aggressive move, actually. I think that's just a right move, a sensible move. I suppose I would add just in here quickly in terms of transfers left. I know you've got 11 here, Simon, but this is a general point. If you have got around the average, what I would be doing now, and what I am doing actually, is thinking that every transfer I make now, do I want this player for the rest of the season? So with my 7 left, the average is 6. You can't really afford many, if any, in my opinion, luxury transfers, because if you like a luxury transfer is someone you're going to want to take out again. That means you're down to like 4 or 3 transfers, with some teams have still got 11 games left. So I think that's a wider point. Interested, Karl, what do you think about that? Do you think that's the right play in terms of people like Trent, Cancelo, maybe Saka, Ramsdale, Mendy, Reece James? These are players who we're likely going to want to hold on all season. Do you think there's any room for kind of luxury moves if you've got around the average?
Well, didn't he say he's got 11 transfers?
Simon has,
So yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought you said I would be moving to players that I think I'd want to keep for the rest of the season. So all those big players that you've mentioned, that's for sure.
Luke, anything to add there?
I don't think so. I mean, unless you're flush, if you're on or around average, then yeah, absolutely. It's players for the rest of the season. You don't want to be moving in and out. If you're over 10, I think you can play a little bit differently, and you can probably afford 4 luxury transfers if you've got 10 or more. But if you're sort of 6, 7, 8, I would just play very, very sensibly and focus on people that you want for the duration.
Superb. Yep, agree. Found a couple of points. He said, like we've said on the Sky and the FPL podcasts, Simon sees the next part of the season split into 2. First, about next 4 game weeks to focus on aggressive, forward-thinking, fixture-laden moves. Second, about game week 34 on, when we've already had the fixture the rest of the season. Does the panel have any players? I'm sorry, I'm not sure. The next part of the season split into 2. Next 4 game weeks to focus on aggressive, forward-thinking moves, and then the second half to focus on more kind of high G moves. So I think he's asking sort of the same question there. I think there's room. I think there's room for both. You know, I wouldn't be bringing in, if you've got limited transfers, I wouldn't be bringing in. You know, I mentioned that Burnley one, for example. I probably wouldn't be doing that Burnley move if I didn't have many transfers left, because you may want to hang on to your Burnley players, but you're likely not going to. But yeah, I think we answered that in the previous one. And he also says, shout out player of the season. This is a new award that he's just thought up. A winner gets a curly whirly and an FF Hub mug. Name your single TFF player of the season. Mine is Gallagher. That is Simon's. Luke, who is your TFF player of the season?
It's Gallagher. We can't take Gallagher. Like, there's one player who shouted him out at the start of the season. I'm gonna say Ramsey because he didn't start at the start of the season. If Ramsey had played at the early part of the season, he would be at the same points, if not more, than Gallagher for $500,000 less even. So I'm going to say Ramsey.
I think for my personal team, I brought in Jared Bowen at a really good time when he was incredibly low owned, and he helped me like fly up the ranks. So I'm going to go for Jared Bowen.
Karls, I should go with Ben White then.
I'm not going with Ben White. No, I'm not going with Ben White. Karl, you going for Gallagher or someone else?
I'm going to go for Salah. He's just like, even though it's expensive, he's just blown the game. If you haven't had him, you just well go home.
Fair enough. I can't argue with that, Karl. That's fair. And Simon also says, thank you so much, all. Really enjoyed the pods and the help it's been to me boost me to my all-time personal best. Thrilled to be finishing this high. Thanks, and look forward to next season already. How to squeeze in Trent, Salah, Kane, and probably Haaland. That is going to be an interesting pre-season pod for sure. Okay, we're done with the questions. Well, absolutely mammoth question session. We were going to try and keep it to under 2 hours. That hasn't happened again. Let's just have a quick look back at our teams before we wrap up. Karl, based on everything we've just talked about now, then have you got any? Has it firmed up any plans for your team for the next few weeks? Please say yes.
No, no, because well, it's just made me like quite content. You know,
Good.
at the beginning, I want to get rid of Cody. So, interestingly, answering those quick fire questions, Luke made an interesting point about if you've got 10. I think it also depends on who's in your team. So look at my team, and I'd be, apart from Cody, probably quite happy to take them all to the end of the season. So even though I've only got 7 transfers left, I may do a little punt. I may bring in a little cheeky from Burnley for a couple of weeks and swap them around.
Burnley block.
So, and then I'll go for a block, but you don't have to do it straight away. You know, if I may go for a cheeky. Well, I wish if I had a couple of Palace defenders. I don't know, so I'm going to wait. It's made me think about the Champions League and that there's different roads I can go down. and maybe it will depend on Tuesday, Wednesday's Champions League and how teams get on. If one of them does bad, then I may jump on that team because I think they'll get knocked out.
Good stuff, Carl. What about you, Luke? We've got your team back up now. Any further thoughts on your team?
So I will be probably losing my City or Liverpool. I don't know. If City beat Liverpool in the cup, I will probably lose one of my Liverpool assets, and then I've got to work out what I can do, because I can pick up any player then in any position if I do that, because it'll be Trent, and Trent or VVD. I can go up to 7 mil with the money I've got in the bank. So Brozier's going to go, probably I can go up to 4 mil for him as well. I can go up to Saka. It's going to, that Liverpool team against Watford's going to be quite telling, because that will determine whether I jump on a Spurs player from that. But yeah, Gallagher's probably gone soon. I've just got to find the right time to hop off onto Ramsey or someone else. And Brozier's probably gone, but I have got a bit of money in the bank. So yeah, those are the two transfers. The rest of my team I'm actually really happy with. So I've probably got more transfers than I need. And that may actually be a curse rather than a blessing, I think.
Okay, good stuff. I think with mine up on screen now, I feel the same as you guys. I look at my team and I'm quite content with how it's looking. Pleased with it. I'm going to get rid of Sarr because after Friday, not 100% sure who to yet. Probably wait until the time. But Ramsdale plays Brighton that weekend. They've got a lot of fixtures. Arsenal have a lot of fixtures going off there. Chelsea play Southampton that weekend. They've also got a lot of fixtures. Probably won't go for Alisson then, because they go Man City, Man United. With Broja, it's a tough one for me because I want to move Rafinha to Reece James, but I can't got the money to do Broja to Reece James. So I need to have a bit of a think. I could just, if Broja's dropped, I could just do Broja to Ramsey, just get it done early. I might do that. And then Rafinha.
You see both team sheets. Yeah, I mean, if he's dropped, it's just no brainer, I think, on that day, and just bring Ramsey straight in.
I think that's probably the plan. So I'll end up with a team then. I'll only have 4 transfers left, which obviously it's not ideal, but in terms of the team, I'd have it'd either be Ramsdale or Mendy, Van Dijk, Robertson, Rudiger, Reece James, Cancelo, Salah, Saka, Kulusevski, Jacob Ramsey, and Harry Kane up front. I think I'm pretty
good team, innit?
Pretty happy with that, I think. And it's all down to the structure and price points this season. That's something I just wanted to ask part of the end of the question just before we did finish up. I wrote the thing that I have learned this season, which I've put into play, is having the right structure and price points has really helped me limit my transfer use all season. I just wanted to ask you two guys if you had any kind of learnings off the top of your head from this season, something which you've implemented or something you've learned from this season. Any thoughts, Carl? Firstly,
put
you on the spot.
It has put me on the spot a little bit. Price points I've been aware of, and I've probably used it a bit more in rotation between my midfield and my strikers. I've looked at a lot more than I probably have previously. Patience is something, even though I knew before, it just becomes really valuable. It's not been rash, a lot of things is, especially for this game and to Sky, is don't jump on the bandwagon quick and burn a transfer. It's take your time and plan properly and being considered.
The amazing thing with Telegraph, I find, is that, like I say, even if you do miss one haul, it will not define your season, and it won't. If you miss one haul, if you miss a hat trick of someone, it won't define your season, because it's only, even a hat trick of any player is only 17 points. And if you look at your mini leagues now, have a look around you. 17 points is not going to define your season. I think that's the thing with Telegraph, which is quite opposite to the other games because of captaincy, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Luke?
I think there's so you've mentioned the key word is patience. The thing that happened to me this season is my main team went off like a rocket, and my other two teams did terribly to start. Well, not terribly, but they were average. And when I'd managed to make, I don't know what it was, 10 or 11 transfers by January, I then looked at my second best team, which was only about 30 points behind, having only used 4 or 5 transfers. And it just pick a team, and I'm almost going to advocate, bar injury, delete your app. Just don't go on the app. Just pick a team up until I'm going to say middle of December, when you get the rumours of who's going to come in. And bar injury, don't make a transfer. Just pick the horses and stick with it. My personal tactic for it, and I know it's not for everybody, by playing FPL and having an early wildcard, by playing Sky with the overhauls, I get all of that. I've got to make a transfer energy I've got in myself done, which means that Telegraph I can genuinely look at. And so for the first half of the season, I almost treat Telegraph as an afterthought and only make transfers where I think, God, that's really important. I know playing multiple games isn't for everybody, but for me, it's the safety net to stop me over managing.
Same.
Because that's my natural tendency.
Same, definitely. I think the only thing I'd add on to there, and I think you're right, is to, we all jumped on Conor Gallagher, I think, reasonably early, apart from obviously Karl, who had him already. If there's a clear, absolute superstar, so say Ramsey had have been playing at the start of the season, 2.2 million, he's getting like tackle bonus every week, getting the odd assist, I would jump on that player very, very early, just to have him in the team. If it's an obvious superstar. Gallagher was a superstar early, and we jumped on him early, and we reaped the rewards because you get the low ownership. Like, I think, I can't remember exactly his ownership when I jumped on him. I wouldn't be surprised if it was like 3, 4, 5%, 36% owned now, and that's how you move up, is these low ownership. So if you do see a potential superstar, jump on them early and just leave them in your team. They'll have bad weeks, they'll have bad streaks, as Gallagher has had himself. He went through a thing a couple of months ago, didn't he, where he didn't do anything, but he's always liable to get something because he's such a fantastic player.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to chuck in this happens every year, and I'm sure we talk about it every year, but there's always sub 3 million players that are ridiculous value. There's always enough of them. And Gallagher, Dennis, Ramsey, Ambrosio, I would say, are all standouts this year. And actually, you could have hopped from Gallagher to Ramsey, and you would have made it midway through the season. If you'd hopped from Dennis to Brozier, if you got on Dennis and you got on Gallagher in the first few weeks of the season, because they were playing and they were doing well. And I think it's that team structure point as well. So patience and team structure, so that I've just got to find the sub 3 million, 2 or 3 players, and they're in, and I stick with them until they're dead, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And
got to stick to this next year, haven't we, boys?
I've got this which I use for every pod now. Before I use a transfers over short-term points. That is something which I always, and that's something I've definitely put into play this season. It's helped me massively. It's like, if you're not sure, like even now, right? So say, just as an example, Broyer's away to Leeds on Saturday and Villa away to Wolves. If I don't have time to make that Broyer to Ramsey transfer, to me, that's not going to define my season. So I'm just like, I'll just leave it. It's fine. It's not the end of the universe. I can always make the transfer in the future. That's something. And what tends to happen a lot as well, I've noticed, is the landscape changes a week later, and you think, actually, or someone else gets injured in your team. And that luxury transfer, so to speak, you actually end up doing. I've noticed it a lot in Sky and Telegraph this year. Is my planned transfer. For some reason, I haven't done it because I just wanted to wait a bit more, and then something else always crops up, and so I've probably used my transfers a lot more optimally that way than just banging them out by doing quite sideways moves, I think. So probably add that in as well. But that's all down to patience as well, right? It's all thing. As you say, we got to do it next year, haven't we, gents? That'll be good. Finally, a quick look at the Fantasy Football Hub mini league update. A £200 members league. I'll go from the top. In 10th place, a name we all know very, very well, Dan Sherwood. 9th place, Matt Walcock, good Dream Team player, I think, as well. 8th place, Dan Sherwood. 7th place, James Ingram, having a fantastic season. 6th, Lewis Stevenson. 5th place, Dan Sherwood. 4th place, Dan Sherwood. 3rd place, Peter Marshall. 2nd place, Tim Barry. And top, Dan Sherwood. Now, we all know a lot of these names, gents, don't we, from our Fantasy Football Hub premium member WhatsApp groups. Look at those ranks. 4th, 6th, 17th, 20th, 22nd, 27th, 28th, 31st, 36th, and 39th. And the majority of those people are Fantasy Football Hub members. For anyone who ever wonders why people join the Hub, this is one of the reasons why. So, we got a fantastic group going, amazing managers, really, really good chat. And I'm so chuffed for every single person in there that they are having the season of their lives. So incredibly well played. And I know there are other Hub members in that group just below. So I'm 32nd. I know, like, Paul McNulty has got 3 teams in the 70s, and there's loads more besides as well. So very well played, everyone. I'm so chuffed for everyone, because it's been a remarkable season for all Hub members. So very, very well done there. And that's it. I think we're going for the record again, gents. Another record. But thank you. It's 12:15. It's 12:15 midnight for anyone who is wondering, because this will probably not come out till the morning now. But thank you so much to everyone who is going to watch this and listen back. Your support, your questions, everything. The support we get for this pod is absolutely incredible. We really, really do appreciate it. It is quite time consuming, but we enjoy doing it because we know how much you all enjoy it and interact with us. So thank you so much for that. Many thanks to Luke and Karl for another late night as well, gents. Really, really appreciate it. Incredible insight. Thank you so much, Karl, for all your data, all the graphs, all your answering, all your mispronunciations of Kulusevski. Really, really, really appreciate it. And thank you, Luke, for all your years of experience of playing the game. It's been another fantastic Telegraph season, and thank you so much, gents. It's really, really appreciated. Luke, where can people get hold of you?
On a couple of Facebook groups and WhatsApp groups, but Twitter at FBL_equation is the easiest way.
And Karl, where can people get hold of you?
I'm also at Twitter at Darkest Jungle.
Superb. My Twitter handle is at FFH_Fergie. So this video will be on the Fantasy Football Hub, Sky and Telegraph YouTube channel, with the podcast versions available on all major podcast platforms. We do recommend you watch the YouTube if you can, obviously, because we have all the graphics and stats up that Karl prepares for us, and from FF Stuff. And obviously thank you to FF Stuff, which again has added a new dynamic to this podcast in terms of its graphics as well. If you liked what you watched, please press the like button. It would be much appreciated. And remember to subscribe to the channel at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. If you enjoyed your listen, please rate the podcast, give us 5 stars, and leave a comment. Our handles on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok are at FFH_HQ. Drop us a follow and feel free to ask us any questions. Our website is fantasyfootballhub.co.uk, where you will find everything you need for fantasy football, all under one roof, including player comparison tools, the fixture ticker, Opta-stats, top player team reveals, and much, much more. Ian Parrin has built a TFF transfer planner for Hub members, and for premium members, as we mentioned a few times this evening, we have a dedicated Telegraph WhatsApp group where we chat everything Telegraph. That group is absolutely smashing, and I'm over the moon for them. All the links are in the description below to sign up. We've partnered with the ffstuff.co.uk, which alongside the Hub has the best Telegraph fantasy resources you can imagine. Take a look at ffstuff.co.uk which also has amazing resources for Sky Fantasy, FPL, and some Dream Team. You can also take a look at www.telegraph.co.uk/fantasy sports, where we give transfer tips each week. I write them. Paul McNulty has recently been writing them as well, who was also on a fantastic season this season. And I also reveal my Telegraph team and plans each week for Fantasy Football Hub members in my weekly article. Fantasy Football Hub has you completely covered for everything TFF and fantasy football. From all of us at Fantasy Football Hub, from Karl and from Luke, the very, very best of luck the remainder of the season. Make sure you absolutely smash it. We will be back for the pre-season for 2022-23, as Simon very aptly put, trying to work out how the hell we fit Trent, Kane, Salah and Haaland in our teams. We'll be looking for budget players there, gents, let me tell you. We'll see you then. Stay safe and good night all.